Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable. See playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 2941, The Growing Sculptures. As he helplessly watched Zen escape from his binding force, Chance's face was shadowed with a small trace of anger. He had no idea about the red light in Zen's right eye, but he had felt the horror brought by it, even though it had lasted for one tiny, ephemeral moment. Crooked way, Chance bellowed, trying to settle the fear he felt inside. He waved his blood-red sword into the air again, and hundreds of beams of sword radiance shot out. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Seeing how aggressive the sword radiances were getting now, Zen was sure that he would be defeated sooner or later if he kept on dodging. He had to put an end to this fight. Seeing the sword radiance rush toward him, Zen waved his snow sword, hacking at 9 different points. 9 flashlight-splitting swordsmanship. He roared. Swish, swish, swish. 9 rays of bright and pearly white-colored sword radiance chopped the air and rushed toward Chance's sword radiance at an incredible speed. But Chance's sword radiance was much more stable and strong since it contained greater other shore power than Zen's. The latter's was remarkably fast, but regretfully, lacked quite a bit in power. When the two sword radiances collided, Zen's 9 rays were smashed into nothingness as if they were made of paper or dry weeds. Apparently, Zen couldn't block the sword radiance Chance was throwing at him. All he could do was to retreat and dodge again and again. He was in a precarious situation now. Now you see it. It's not that easy to make up for such a huge gap between cultivation levels, Chance remarked casually, staring at Zen with a scornful gaze. He began to approach Zen impassively with his sword in hand. The direct descendants of the palace nodded subconsciously when they heard this. Chance's words made sense. How could Zen confront such a strong warrior at the chaotic source realm, especially when he was comparatively much weaker? However, unknown to them, Chance was still a bit puzzled by the red light in Zen's right eye. He didn't know what it was, but could sense that it was quite a rare other shore token since it could disturb even his mind. He guessed it could be a mysterious type and would not contain much other shore power. Even the mysterious other shore tokens of stage 14 could unleash no more than 300 divine megatons of force. But Zen had unleashed almost 1,000 divine megatons of force just now. Was it possible that he had 2 other shore tokens? Pondering over the possibilities, Chances waved his blood-red sword. Annihilation World. The sword radiance that rushed out this time contained an overwhelming intent of annihilation. Even if someone was just grazed by it, they would sustain serious injuries. Faced with such an offensive attack, Zen was forced to dodge again. He was being forced to retreat continuously by Chance's attacks. Very soon, he completely withdrew from the heavenly cultivation palace. Seeing the ongoing fight, the palace maids and servants were frightened to the core and fled away. Guards of the Phoenix Palace recognized Chance, so they did not dare stop him. Lavender, Nellie, and Laquisha were merely following the fight closely. Zen was moving towards a disadvantage now, and they looked worried. They were nervously watching him dodge the sword light again and again. If he wasn't careful enough, he might die. That was not something they wanted to see. It looks like I will have to use the civilization artifact. Fine then. Zen had told almost everything he had come across in the dark region to Flamen and Athamar. But he had concealed the civilization artifact from them. Previously, Flamen had wanted to seal the memory flame of Teague, but Teague had managed to find a way to dispel it at the last moment. Therefore, it was impossible for her to learn the secrets of the Regal Jade civilization and the civilization artifact. But once Elvinia recovered, she would tell Flamen, who was her mother, about these sooner or later. It wasn't like it could be kept a secret forever. While he thought about this, an idea flashed in his mind. A virtual shadow of the civilization artifact suddenly appeared in his inner world. And in the outside world, with a sweep of his hand, a jade sculpture appeared in front of him. A sculpture of the regal jade beast, merely a single foot tall. Buzz. The regal jade beast sculpture stood still like any ordinary jade sculpture would do. Chance had been forcing Zen backwards step by step, but seeing this, his eye twitched and his face revealed a strange expression. The corners of his mouth slightly curled into a smile. "Huh, this is your other shore token? A descending type?" There was a sarcastic tone to the question. As soon as he finished his words, he wielded his blood-red sword in the hope of smashing it in a single strike. A beam of sword radiance shot straight towards the regal jade beast sculpture. Bang! The sword radiance hit the surface of the regal jade beast sculpture with a crisp sound. But unlike what Chance had expected, it merely left a deep sword mark instead of breaking it down. This other shore token is remarkably solid, but how many strikes can it withstand? Chance sneered contemptuously. He again waved his sword 3 times in a row, hacking at the sculpture repeatedly. Hit again and again by his annihilation world, which contained enormous amounts of annihilation intent, the regal jade beast sculpture suddenly broke into 1,000 emerald green pieces which gradually disappeared. As a descending type of other shore token, the sculpture was quite vulnerable to damage. And once it was damaged, it would need a large amount of divine crystals to be repaired. Seeing the sculpture break into pieces, Ahmad and the direct descendants burst into laughter. What a weak descending type of other shore token. Was that a joke? That was the weakest other shore token I've ever seen. Hang on, the other shore tokens of descending type are supposed to be powerful since they can help a warrior break through the limits of corporeal body. But why was this one so weak? The corporeal body that hadn't gone through the chaotic source reinforcement could not withstand 1,000 divine megatons of force. But a token of the descending type didn't need the corporeal body to bear it. Instead, it could help the warrior break through that limit and exert an even greater force. For example, Elvinia's warrior of the Stonehill could burst out more than 1,000 divine megatons of force by itself. Zen's sculpture seemed immovable and fragile, which was truly incredible. It was reasonable that they mocked him. But just as Chance had smashed this other shore token, Zen's hand waved lightly in the air again. Buzz! Another other shore token appeared right next to him, yet another regal jade beast sculpture was standing impassively. What's this? Chance was a little stunned. Ahmad and the others were confused as well. The regal jade beast sculpture had been cut into smithereens by Chance. He hadn't seen Zen use any divine crystals to repair it. Furthermore, even if Zen did use divine crystals, a broken other shore token could not be repaired within such a short period of time. Was it possible that they were wrong? Was it because this particular other shore token wasn't a descending type? What was the use of the regal jade beast he had summoned then? Chance was getting a little impatient now. He didn't know what Zen was playing at. He flew up, raised his blood-red sword with his left hand, and hit the second sculpture directly. Bang! The second sculpture was smashed into pieces by a single strike this time. As soon as he smashed this sculpture, Chance began to chase after Zen once again. He didn't care what the use of these regal jade sculptures was. All he wanted was to kill Zen. With Chance in hot pursuit, Zen acted very calmly. Since he was unable to fight against Chance head-on, he merely kept dodging and retreating. And while retreating, he kept on releasing regal jade beast sculptures one after another. Chance was hot-headed, but if he had been cautious enough, then he would have instantly noticed that these sculptures were gradually growing in size. Each one was bigger and taller than the previous one. Chance finally noticed this after smashing a few of them. There's something strange about his sculptures. Out of fighting instinct, Chance didn't let go of any sculpture even after realizing that. He cut through all the tokens that Zen was releasing into pieces along the way. Forced to repeatedly destroy these sculptures, Chance had to slow down. They were proving to be quite a nuisance. Just as Chance cut the 10th sculpture, he was faced with yet another problem. The regal jade beast sculpture had now grown as tall as a man. Previously, he had been able to stab through the sculptures in a single strike, but now, he could only leave a few cracks on it with one strike. These regal jade sculptures were becoming bigger and stronger. Chapter 2942, There is always more. Now, Chance had to hit the sculpture over 10 times to destroy it. Deafening, clanging sounds echoed as his sword strikes collided with the sculpture. He cut the sculpture a dozen times before it finally broke into pieces. However, as soon as the sculpture crumbled, a new one appeared before him. Zen had summoned another statue. It was even burlier and larger than the last one. The sculptures will just keep coming, Chance said to himself, getting frustrated. He realized that it was a mistake to waste his energy on the statues. He should have dodged them and directly attacked Zen instead. He sidestepped the latest statue and prepared to rush towards Zen. In that instant, a chessboard appeared in Zen's hand. Like the statues, it was made of regal jade. 9 vertical and 9 horizontal lines were laid out on the chessboard, forming a total of 81 intersections. There was a single cyan chessman on the board. Zen delicately placed a finger on the cyan chessman, and pushed it a step forward. The statue sprang to life. It lunged forward and grabbed Chance. Chance was caught by surprise when the statue took hold of him. He had thought the statues were only used to make the array, and that they couldn't move. "Go to perdition," Chance shouted. At this point he was more irritated than afraid. He had stopped not because he was afraid but trying to save his time and strength. If he wanted, he would be able to destroy them one after another. As the statue dragged him, Chance turned, wielding his sword. The light of his sword circled as he swung at the statue. There was a crashing sound as it cracked and crumbled. He had broken the statue into pieces with his sword. The disciples of the Phoenix Palace cheered, "Chance is awesome. I've never seen anything like that strange other shore token, but it won't be enough to beat Chance." While the disciples were proclaiming their support for Chance, one of them suddenly pointed at Zen and gasped, "Look." Zen was holding the regal jade chessboard with one hand. He raised his other hand, and immediately another statue of regal jade beast appeared beside him. It was huge and forbidding. It was definitely taller and fiercer than any of the previous statues. They could see traces of green energy surrounding the regal jade beast statue. Zen smiled faintly. Although he was just standing there, not saying anything, there was something subtly threatening about the way he touched the piece on the chessboard. The moment that Chance had smashed the last statue, the cyan chessman on the board also crumbled and fell apart. Now, Zen gently pushed another chessman forward, and the statue beside him rushed straight towards Chance. It was difficult to conclude which type of other shore token the civilization artifact was. It had various characteristics, including features of descending type, strengthening type, mysterious type, and even auxiliary type. In order to evade the Nihility race, the Regal Jade civilization had suppressed some of their power by hiding on stage 13. Yet it could still give Zen a terrifying force in the form of this chessboard, which was able to summon statues of regal jade beasts. Each time Zen summoned a statue, it would be more powerful than the statue before it. Thus the more frequently he summoned a statue, the stronger it would become. However, the chessboard had one important flaw: it required a huge consumption of the divine crystals. Zen hadn't wanted to use the civilization artifact in this fight. Unfortunately, Chance had left him with no other choice. As the statue attacked Chance, Zen waved his hand again. Along with the new chessman on the board, another enormous statue appeared beside him. Zen touched the chessman and the new statue also rushed towards Chance. At the sight of two statues attacking him, Chance began to feel a trace of fear. He realized that every new statue was stronger than the last one. And he had no idea how many of these Zen could summon. Perhaps Zen had an endless array of these statues at his disposal. The last destroyed statue had been the 12th one, and it had 800 divine megatons of force. As Chance prepared to attack the two new statues, he wondered how powerful they were. The moment they came close, he knew the answer. The 13th statue had 900 divine megatons of force. And the 14th one had 1000 divine megatons of force. The power of the statues was increasing by 100 divine megatons with each iteration. At the same time, they were becoming harder and taller. Chance's sword clanged as he darted forward, slashing at the two statues. He was thankful that the moving statues were very slow. They were unable to match his speed. Despite the force of his numerous attacks on these two statues, he only managed to cut off a few pieces of jade. Ahmad and the other disciples could see that Chance was having a difficult time, and they exchanged confused glances. The descending type of other shore token was very powerful, in part because the owner did not need to bear the force. But it also had a limitation. It could not grow with the owner. So most of the ambitious people of the other shore realm would never choose this kind of other shore token for themselves. However, Zen's statues were incredibly strong. The guards of the Phoenix Palace also stood nearby, watching the battle between Zen and Chance. Many of them used to be oneness guards. They were powerful and experienced. At first, like the Phoenix Palace disciples, they had believed there was no doubt Chance would win. After all, he was from the land of sword grief. But with every new statue that appeared, each one stronger than the statue before it, they began to feel uneasy. They felt that Chance actually had a chance of being defeated. There's no way he can just keep summoning as many statues as he wants. There has to be a limit. But we don't know that. For all we know, he could keep summoning new statues infinitely. If the strength and numbers of the statues keep increasing, they may overturn this entire place," said one of the guards solemnly. The other guards stared at him, shaking their heads. "No way. Other shore tokens can be extremely powerful, but they have to be reasonable. Remember, that guy has only reached the 13th stage of the Other Shore realm. There's no way he could have gotten his hands on an invincible Other Shore token. Of course, the power of the Other Shore tokens did not always strictly correspond to their stage. There were powerful tokens in Stage 1, and there were tokens from Stage 13 that could be stronger than tokens from Stage 14. But the variance in their level of power would not be too great. There were some Other Shore tokens that had the power to overturn the Oneness Sky Palace, but there was no way they would be found in Stage 13 on the Other Shore. Dang it, Chance shouted furiously. His hair stood on end with his exertions. A primitive and unique force began forming inside his body. At the same time, a melodious bell sounded. His blood, cried the disciples. Chance's blood is pure. He has just summoned the bell of Eastern Emperor. Chance raised his sword slightly and said, "Suppress." He swept his sword across the two statues, and shadows appeared over each of them. Two huge bells were falling from the sky. There was a clanging sound. As the bells landed, the two statues were broken into pieces in the blink of an eye. "Ha," said Chance triumphantly. He looked at Zen, intending to gloat, but instead he saw something terrifying. Zen still wore that faint smile. Next to him stood three statues. Each was taller and stronger than the two statues Chance had just destroyed. Chapter 2943, Chance's Mother. There was a gentle tapping sound as Zen put his fingers on three pieces on the chessboard once again. He instantly activated the 15th, 16th, and 17th Regal Jade Beast statues, which ran towards Chance. Every time one more Regal Jade Beast was summoned and appeared, its strength and body grew significantly. Generally speaking, the power of the three Regal Jade Beasts was comparable to that of the ordinary Chaotic Source Realm warrior, but they were slightly weaker when it came to physical strength. Although Chance was a powerful warrior of the Chaotic Source Realm, it was difficult for him to fight against them. After all, he was outnumbered. He bit his teeth and extracted the blood of his body. The blood-red sword, which seemed to contain endless amounts of power, turned into a big bell, and then moved towards the Regal Jade Beasts to attack them. Bang, bang, bang. Chance had easily killed the 15th Regal Jade Beast. The 16th Regal Jade Beast, however, actually managed to withstand the Bell of Eastern Emperor's attack, but countless cracks burst on the surface of its body. The beast didn't break into pieces until Chance attacked it for the second time. The 17th Regal Jade Beast was an exception. When the 17th Regal Jade Beast was hit by the Bell of Eastern Emperor, only one crack appeared on its body. It seemed that its physical body was terribly strong. The guards who watched the battle from the distance all gasped at the scene. How terrifying this jade statue is. Even though Chance has made use of the Other Shore token and the Bloodline Thurgy, he still can't destroy it. Can that man really make these jade statues become stronger and stronger? Speculations filled the air as such a crazy method was unheard of and totally out of the others' imaginations. Even the disciples of the Phoenix Palace were amazed. Their faces darkened as they watched the shocking scene. For them, Chance had always been invincible, but now he couldn't even touch Zen's sleeve and was completely tired of dealing with the statues. This result was completely beyond their expectation, and it made them upset. As for Chance, all the color was drained from his face and he became speechless. He was also confused. How could another Shore Realm warrior be so powerful to deal with? There was no doubt that he'd become everyone's laughingstock if Zen defeated him today. Outraged, Chance madly squeezed his Other Shore token and blood power. After he used the Bells of Eastern Emperor to attack the 17th Regal Jade Beast statue 7 times, he finally smashed it into pieces. He is such a powerful Chaotic Source Realm warrior, Zen said flatly. The power Chance had released reached 2,000 divine megatons. With the help of the shadows of the Bells of Eastern Emperor, the power had increased by more than tenfold. On the other hand, Zen also had something he was thankful for. If it wasn't for the civilization artifact, he would never defeat Chance. It was no wonder the Chaotic Source Realm was known as the Chaotic Source Reinforcement. After one had successfully reached the Chaotic Source Realm, their body would be reinforced and possess an unparalleled strength. And so, Zen had the slightest hint of expectation for the Chaotic Source world in his heart. But, the 18th and 19th Regal Jade Beasts should be able to defeat you, he muttered. Then, he put his finger on the chessboard and pushed out 2 more pieces. The Regal Jade Spirit had told Zen that this Regal Jade chessboard was just a small one and could only accommodate 81 chess pieces. Zen was able to summon a limit of 81 Regal Jade creatures. Unfortunately, too many Regal Jade creatures would consume a great number of divine crystals. If the Regal Jade civilization reached the Desire World and got rid of the Lust World's suppression, it would be able to give Zen a bigger chessboard. There were 19 horizontal lines and 19 vertical lines on the chessboard, so there would be a total of 361 regal jade creatures that he could summon. Clang, clang, clang. 2 regal jade beasts of nearly 10 feet tall ran quickly on the cyan stone path of the Phoenix Palace. It took Chance a lot of other shore power to destroy the 3 regal jade beasts earlier. He looked exhausted at this point. Now, Chance tried his best to hold on as he didn't want to disgrace Eastern Emperor Tai, especially since he was the Emperor's direct descendant. However, he no longer hoped to defeat Zen. He faced the regal jade beasts that went straight for him, and then absorbed the divine crystals like mad to replenish the power of his other shore token. It was known that the other shore power of the other shore token could be replenished with the divine crystals, but the blood power could not. Thus, the only way for him to defeat the 2 regal jade beasts was to extract his own blood power to the extreme. Shatter! Chance roared as he rushed headlong towards the 2 regal jade beasts. Shadows of the bells of Eastern Emperor descended along his blood-red sword blade as he unleashed terrifying power. The path in the Phoenix Palace was an absolute wreck, but the 2 regal jade beasts seemed to be made of fine iron. Only a mere crack surfaced on each of their bodies after the shadows of the bells of Eastern Emperor had hit them. In other words, they weren't seriously affected. Just as Chance attacked once more, one of the regal jade beasts suddenly bolted forward and grabbed at him. The regal jade beast didn't have a special theurgy and only relied on its own strength and physical body. Chance had dodged several attacks from the regal jade beasts before, but the beast's strength had been greatly enhanced. He had failed to dodge when the beast grasped him. Swish, bang, the regal jade beast lifted Chance up in the air, and then smashed him onto the ground. The impact of the huge force caused the surrounding ground to tremble, and the walls on both sides of the palace were shattered. Laquisha, Nellie, Lavender, and the direct descendants also lost their balance and fell down. The physical body of the chaotic Source Realm warrior was extremely solid. On the other hand, an ordinary Other Shore Realm warrior who was under a similar attack would have been smashed to pieces. However, Chance managed to withstand the attack. He still wanted to fight back, but when he was about to turn over, another regal jade beast waved its thick palm and slapped him. Boom, boom, boom. Despite the continuous attacks of the 2 regal jade beasts, Chance still managed to endure them because his body had undergone the chaotic source reinforcement. What a strong body! Zen scowled and smacked his lips. Even if he himself used the Shade Stone liquid to protect his body, he still couldn't resist the violent attacks from the 2 regal jade beasts. At this moment, Chance began to groan inwardly. Chance's physical body, though fortified by the chaotic source reinforcement, was now extremely fatigued. If he suffered a few more attacks, his physical body's strength would decline greatly and the regal jade beasts would end up smashing him into a bloody pulp. But what could he do? Give up? Beg for mercy? As a direct descendant of the Phoenix Palace and the talent of the Land of Sword Grief, would he admit defeat to a disciple from the Oneness Sky Palace? Driven by his strong self-esteem, Chance wasn't willing to do that. While Chance was in despair, 2 ice crystals suddenly appeared beside him. As soon as the 2 ice crystals emerged, they pummeled into the bodies of the 2 regal jade beasts. As a result, the emerald regal jade beasts turned into 2 stiff, icy sculptures. After that, a woman in a white gauze dress quietly appeared beside Chance. The moment she showed up, the temperature in the entire Phoenix Palace dropped by several degrees. She stretched out her slender white fingers and gently stroked the 2 ice sculptures. Crash! The 2 ice sculptures shattered into pieces on the ground. Chance groaned in pain, and then slowly adjusted his body. Mother! He called out and looked at the woman. A few seconds later, another shout ripped through the cold air. Mother! Ahmad yelled and ran over from the distance. Who are you from? How dare you act wildly and atrociously in our Phoenix Palace? The woman hissed. She had quite an aloof face. She glared at Zen who stood not far away, her voice filled with rage. Chapter 2944, More Important. The woman dressed in white was Lady Jean. She enjoyed a high position in the Phoenix Palace and was not shy about showing it. When Chance was in the middle of a battle at the Heavenly Cultivation Palace, some maids saw it and immediately rushed off to tell Jean what was going on. She rushed over, infuriated to see her son being beaten by 2 regal jade beasts. The guards saw Jean, exchanged a quick look and quietly slid away. Other concubines could be reasoned with and spoken to easily, but Jean was cold and loved to let her anger out on others around her. The guards had looked on when Chance was being beaten by the regal jade beasts. They were too weak to stop it, but if Jean were to turn to them in anger and ask questions, they'd have no way of defending themselves, and so they opted to run away from the situation. Hearing Jean's words, Zen was helpless. Like mother, like son. Chance and his mother were very much alike in character. Jean didn't even know what was going on and had immediately decided to criticize and blame Zen. Your son and I are sparring with each other. Why are you making such a fuss? Zen retorted. Mother, he crumbled my sword right when he got here. Obviously he is here to cause trouble. Punish him, Ahmad said whining. Jean looked daggers at Zen and said, as I said, you're acting wildly and atrociously. There's no way for you to deny it. She snorted in derision as pieces of ice crystals floated from her fingertips towards Zen. The crystals were so icy cold that they would have shattered the jade statues into a million pieces if they so much as touched them. The direct descendants all bubbled with excitement on seeing the ice crystals flying at Zen. Most of them were proud and arrogant, always looking down upon the disciples outside of the Phoenix Palace. This attributed to the fact they all shared a bit of the blood of Eastern Emperor Tai. Zen had beaten Chance in their territory and this was unacceptable to them. They had taken it as not only a defeat to Chance, but to all the direct descendants of the Phoenix Palace. This feeling writhing in their hearts, they watched eagerly in hope Zen would swiftly meet his demise. Of course, Jean's cultivation base was higher than Chance's. Killing Zen would be a piece of cake for her. Chance and Ahmad looked at Zen as a dead man walking. He was about to die and didn't even know it. Not a trace of fear appeared on his face. What an idiot, thought Chance. But the brothers soon changed their tone. Not only did Zen show no fear, a smile now shaped his lips. Zen, watch out for the ice crystals. Lavender, Nellie, and Laquisha warned him, filled with angst. They hadn't expected Jean to appear once Zen had won. They had met her once before. Laquisha had trouble controlling the sprite fire and set fire to the Phoenix Palace. Jean happened to pass by and put the fire out. She wanted to teach Laquisha a violent lesson but Flamen had stopped her. From then on, Lavender, Nellie and Laquisha knew Jean was a tough one, but they didn't expect her to take Zen's life on her first attack. Zen didn't flinch at the ice crystals floating in front of him. Instead, he slowly stretched his fingertips out towards the crystals. The ice crystals with a deadly cold aura flew away, disappearing as if they had never even existed. What? Ahmad, Chance and the other direct descendants were all shocked. Even if Zen could defeat Chance who had reached the chaotic source realm, how could he deflate Jean's Thurgy so easily? The ice crystals might have looked ordinary but they were definitely not something Zen could withstand. Jean remained stone cold and unflinching. Lady Flamen, you're already here. Why are you hiding? She said coldly. A figure in cerise materialized silently next to Zen. There was a faint smile on Flamen's face as she said, I gave Zen a token to enter, so he may walk freely in the Phoenix Palace. He's not making trouble here. He broke Ahmad's sword and hurt Chance. Don't you think that's a bit far for a disciple of the Oneness Sky Palace? Jean's eyes burned with anger. Even in the face of Flamen, she wouldn't yield an inch. Just then, Nellie came to Zen's side frowning and said, Ahmad wanted to drive us away from the Phoenix Palace and almost killed Lavender. If not for Zen, he would have. Chance is even worse. Even though he's a powerful warrior at the chaotic source realm, he still fought Zen. Then you showed up acting like this after Zen had defeated them both. Aren't you ashamed? Like mother, like son. They have no sense of shame, Laquisha added. Lavender narrowed her eyes and with an air of caution, moved quietly beside Zen, snorted and said nothing. Being jeered by Nellie and Laquisha only infuriated Jean more. She was a high-ranking figure here. How dare they speak to her this way? Shut your mouth. You are asking for death to come calling. Jean clenched her fists. Ice crystals began appearing above them, quickly turning into a snowstorm sweeping straight towards Zen and his women. The ice crystals she cast could freeze a space forever. If a person was covered with her ice crystals, they were as good as dead. The fierce snowstorm was about to engulf them when Flamen raised her hands and layers of golden flames spurted out and fluttered through the air. Splash! With a flick of the divine flames of the Sun Crow race, the snowstorm had dissipated. Lady Jean, that's enough. Please go back to your place and rest, said Flamen. Lady Flamen, are you really going to protect these lowly outsiders? Jean snapped, her pretty face twisted in anger. The Phoenix Palace might have seemed peaceful and serene, but the concubines were always in disagreements with one another. Jean and Flamen had never been on good terms. And now, Ahmad and Chance were beat and Flamen sided with the outsiders. Jean could not make sense of this. Lowly outsiders. A smile of mockery crossed Flamen's face. Firstly, they are the disciples of the Oneness Sky Palace, not lowly outsiders. Secondly, they are friends of my daughter. Friends? Jean smiled disdainfully and was about to respond, but Flamen interrupted her. Thirdly, compared to us, Zen is much more important to the Oneness Sky Palace. Zen was the only one capable of deciphering the truth enlightenment. Based on that, Zen was indeed more important to the Oneness Sky Palace than the concubines of the Phoenix Palace. Jean's heart skipped a beat at Flamin's words. Zen, more important than them? What made him so important? This was a hard pill to swallow, and she thought Flamin was probably lying to her anyway. I don't care what you say. I won't let this matter go to rest unless you hand them over. Jean said coldly. So you want to fight me? Asked Flamin with a menacing smile. Chapter 2945, Be Summoned. Jean's eyes glinted dangerously as she began to assess the weight of the situation. Even though her strength was comparable to Flamin's, it was unwise to fight Flamin openly within the Phoenix Palace. In any case, she was cautious enough not to do anything foolish. Moreover, Flamin said that Zen held a greater importance in the Oneness Sky Palace than they did. If Zen was truly significant to the palace, she wouldn't want to further complicate things. Otherwise, her position in the Phoenix Palace would be at stake. Once Eastern Emperor Tai punished her, she would be demoted from her current position. Meanwhile, Flamin merely stood there waiting calmly, with a charming smile etched on her face. In actuality, she had set this trap up. The only thing she had to do now was wait for Jean to take the bait and walk into it. The tension in the area was almost palpable. Even the direct descendants felt their hearts pounding against their ribs. It was not that big of a deal for the disciples of the Oneness Sky Palace to fight in the Phoenix Palace. However, it would be a serious matter if the two wives of the Emperor fought there. Moreover, both of them held high positions. Zen and the others remained quiet while assessing the current scenario. He surmised that Flamin was confident enough to challenge Jean on the spot. Boom! All of a sudden, they heard a melodious chime coming from the depths of the Phoenix Palace. It rang all throughout the entire palace. Flamin, Jean, and the direct descendants turned their heads toward the direction of the chime. Afterwards, they heard a loud booming voice. It was such a magnificent sound that resonated from the depths of the Phoenix Palace. Zen, come here and meet Eastern Emperor Tai. The entirety of the Phoenix Palace heard the voice clearly. He is awake. Flamin wasn't able to hide her surprise. Eastern Emperor Tai had been cultivating in solitude for such a long time. This worried the other people in the Phoenix Palace. Jean also showed a flash of surprise on her face. Eastern Emperor Tai finally woke up. But instead of summoning someone from their palace, the first person he wanted to see was Zen. With all due respect, Lady Flamin, who do you mean? Zen asked courteously. Flamin responded with a smile and said, it's Eastern Emperor Tai. Make haste. He already summoned you. I'll escort you there. You'll be showing me the way. Zen exchanged looks with Nellie, Lavender and Laquisha. One thing was for certain. They were all dumbfounded. Jean was extremely narrow-minded. What would happen if she got mad at the girls after he left with Flamin? After all, they wouldn't be able to resist clashing with a strong warrior like her. Nonetheless, Flamin perfectly understood what worried Zen. She casually said, there is no need to worry. This is the Phoenix Palace. Even though some of the people here might be unreasonable, they are not completely foolish. They won't tempt fate and bring about their own deaths. The first person Eastern Emperor Tai wanted to meet after he just woke up was Zen. Even a fool would be able to grasp the true importance of Zen. No matter how senseless Jean was, she wouldn't kill Nellie and the other two. In addition to that, the Phoenix Palace was not exactly huge. Masters like Flamin would be able to cover it easily with her spiritual sense. After hearing that, Zen turned to the three girls and said, kindly wait for me in the Heavenly Cultivation Palace. Nellie, Lavender, and Laquisha had already been living in the Phoenix Palace for a considerable period of time. In that time, they had heard so much about the Oneness Sky Palace. The legend of Eastern Emperor Tai had an even greater impact on them. They found it extremely fascinating. He was a great warrior who gathered and established an outstanding force of the humans using his own strength. Moreover, he was the supreme leader of the Oneness Sky Palace. The moment he finished his cultivation in seclusion, he wanted to meet Zen. For this, they felt incredibly honored and proud. Understood. Laquisha and Nellie nodded their heads in response. Meanwhile, Lavender smiled at him and tilted her head to one side. It was a good thing that the girls accepted this order obediently. With that said, Flamin turned around and led the way. Zen followed her politely. Ahmad and Chance remained rooted to the spot. They were completely stunned. Chance was even more shocked by the unexpected turn of events. He had rarely seen his father, Eastern Emperor Tai, over the last several years. Yet, His father wanted to meet Zen, who was merely a disciple of the Oneness Sky Palace. What on earth was happening? Mother, where exactly does this guy come from? Chance asked Jean out of confusion. How was I supposed to know? Jean retorted. You harassed him without even knowing his background. You are always causing problems for me. Jean was in no way inferior to Flamen when it came to strength. However, she was always at a disadvantage because Flamen had been favored by Eastern Emperor Tai the moment she got promoted. If Flamen chose to tell him of this incident, her current position would be in jeopardy. Sensing their mother's anger, both Chance and Ahmad were now trembling with fear. Chance felt wronged. She also wanted to kill Zen even before knowing his background. He wasn't the only one at fault. However, he didn't dare say these thoughts out loud. He had no intention of contradicting his mother. With a cold expression on her face, Jean just huffed and stormed off. True to what Flamen said, it was obvious she wouldn't do anything stupid. She wouldn't hurt those three girls. On their way towards the Emperor, Zen finally saw a chance to ask about something that he was always curious about. He turned to Flamen and inquired, Lady Flamen, is there no Empress in the Phoenix Palace? In his own perception, people were often fond of becoming emperors in the mortal world. Such eye-catching titles could easily gather and reinforce their imperial power. Meanwhile, people in the world of warriors cultivated themselves by defying the laws of nature. They honored strength above all else. Even with a good title, one would be kicked out of the throne sooner or later if they were not strong enough. One's lifespan would last long after they reached the true God realm. After that, they normally would not care about titles anymore. Therefore, except the 4 divine kingdoms in the lower world, the great forces Zen had ever met rarely established divine kingdoms. Moreover, in the divine land, those forces would only claim themselves as powerful clans. However, it seemed that the source world had retaken the hierarchy of the secular world once more. Hearing this, Flamen smiled. We are different from the 9 Li race, the Bearing race, and the divine farmer race. They all take blood relationship as their basis, so each of them is more closely united than us. Eastern Emperor Tai established the Oneness Sky Palace in the Bloom Divine Province because he wanted to gather all the humans that were dispersed all throughout the source world. He did it to form another human force. As a result, we need to make use of the hierarchy of a kingdom, she graciously explained. The 7 emperors of the 7 mountains settled in the Bloom Divine Province. They formed an orthodox force and welcomed all humans from all over the world. In the old days, it had been difficult for Eastern Emperor Tai to establish a strong force of humans. Instead of wasting his energy in creating a new system, he chose to use the traditional titles and routines. Thus, this hierarchy was formed. There is definitely no empress in this palace, Flamen finally confirmed while grinning. Nevertheless, some of Eastern Emperor Tai's wives, specifically Jean, had tried many times to compete for the empress throne. However, she was rejected by Eastern Emperor Tai every time. Flamen continued to explain this to Zen while they walked into the depths of the Phoenix Palace. As soon as they stopped walking, an exquisite 3-story pavilion came into sight. Compared to the magnificent halls he saw while walking inside the Phoenix Palace, this seemed a bit simpler. You can go inside now, Zen. Flamen stopped walking as soon as they reached the pavilion. Her escort duty to Zen had been fulfilled. I'm going in alone. Zen was taken aback. He thought Flamen would accompany him inside as well. Flamen nodded in response. He only summoned you. Hence, you have to enter by yourself. Zen looked at the simple door of the pavilion. Promptly, he stepped forward. The pavilion was indeed small, but the interior design was very elegant. As soon as he stepped inside it, a faint fragrance greeted his nose. He couldn't quite place what the fragrance was. Nevertheless, it somehow made him feel peaceful. A thin veil covered the main hall of the pavilion. It was such a delicate fabric, yet it concealed whatever it had behind it. As Zen walked closer to it, the veil curtains automatically opened and moved toward the sides. He saw a simple yet ancient-looking screen bearing an illustration of an exquisitely huge bell standing in the middle of the main hall. This bell looked exactly the same as the bell of Eastern Emperor that Chance had activated with his blood. Zen, a middle-aged man clothed in a gray robe, came out from the side of the screen. This man wore a purple and gold crown upon his head. He had a square face, his eyes looked as sharp as hawks, and his facial expression was serious. It commanded a magnificent presence. He was the great Eastern Emperor Tai. Yes. Zen cupped his hands together and bowed to him. Chapter 2946, Zen's Request. Eastern Emperor Tai stared at Zen, a smile cracking through his serious face. He was always a gravely serious man. Zen didn't know how rare this smile was. He stretched a finger towards Zen as he smiled. The finger released the powerful, sharp radiance like a sword. This was a technique that could be performed by any ordinary swordsman. Naturally, however, as it was Eastern Emperor Tai employing the finger strike, it was incredibly powerful. Zen felt that the finger strike contained the aura of the truth of eternal sword, intense truth enlightenment. Seeing the finger strike heading straight for him, Zen too stretched out a finger. A white spiral burst from his finger's radiance and he began making use of the truth enlightenment as well. Phew, whoosh, swish, Zen launched an attack with his finger and Eastern Emperor Tai moved slightly and avoided it, responding with a horizontal chop of his own. Zen reacted by gently moving his finger upward, and with a flip of his hand, he instantly stopped the chop coming at him. In the blink of an eye, they had exchanged more than 10 moves. Eastern Emperor Tai restrained his strength to a very low level, only fighting Zen with the truth of eternal sword intent. Zen had comprehended more content of the truth enlightenment than he had. His finger radiance was sharper and more formidable than Eastern Emperor Tai's, suppressing Eastern Emperor Tai's every attack and forcing him to give up over and over. I was on the other shore for quite a while this time, leaving only a soul fragment here. When anything important happened in the Oneness Sky Palace, Athamar and the others would report it to my soul fragment. After I came back and fused with the soul fragment, I was very surprised by you, said Eastern Emperor Tai. Zen pretended not to understand and asked innocently, why? What is it that has shocked you? I have been studying the truth enlightenment for many years, too many. I once contemplated giving it up. Altogether I've only deciphered about 100 words. But you, only around 100 years old, have already surpassed me in deciphering the Sanskrit words. That is what has me shocked, Eastern Emperor Tai said earnestly. He was the man responsible for the construction of the orthodox human force. His goal was to achieve the ultimate level in all respects, such as deciphering the Sanskrit words and cultivating the swordsmanship. The truth enlightenment had hindered him for too long. He hadn't achieved anything until only recently. However, after comprehending about 100 words, the difficulty once again ramped up massively. There was no telling when he would completely decipher the 2 Sanskrit words. I'm flattered, Zen responded courteously. Eastern Emperor Tai shook his head and said, our Oneness Sky Palace is very lucky that Athamar led you in. May I ask you a question? Do you believe you can decipher the entire truth enlightenment? In truth, Jeffrey had already deciphered it all. But Zen would not tell him that. Instead, his face saddened and he said, the structures of the Sanskrit words of the truth enlightenment are extremely special. It's indeed very difficult to find a correct answer and decipher them, but I've found a method I think could make it possible. He actually had no idea how to decipher the Sanskrit words. He had just heard these words from Jeffrey and decided to vomit them out now. When he met Athamar, Zen knew that sooner or later he would meet Eastern Emperor Tai. He hoped to rebuild the 9 Li race and the Oneness Sky Palace was the best ally he could have in his mission, especially considering they were against the Bering race and the Divine Farmer race. With this in mind, Zen knew he should agree to a favor asked of him by Eastern Emperor Tai. But telling him deciphering the Sanskrit words was a piece of cake for Jeffrey was just not possible. You have found a method. What kind of method? Eastern Emperor Tai asked, brimming with curiosity. Deciphering the truth enlightenment was important work, and Eastern Emperor Tai was particularly interested in getting it done. After all, he had spent too much time and energy on deciphering the 2 Sanskrit words. Zen hesitated before saying, the method is difficult to explain. The process relies heavily on inspiration and guesses. Deciphering the Sanskrit words was something that was both mysterious and rigid. It was impossible for Zen to accurately describe it, because it was far from an easy task. Otherwise, all of the Sanskrit words in the world would be deciphered effortlessly. Eastern Emperor Tai was eager to examine Zen's memory, but since doing so was quite rude, he opted against it. All right, Eastern Emperor Tai waved his hand. Last time Athamar told me that you have deciphered and comprehended 150 words of the truth enlightenment. Have you made any progress since? I've been cultivating on the other shore since then. I haven't had much time, but I've deciphered more than 200 words, Zen replied. Eastern Emperor Tai's eyes lit up once more. According to Zen, it might be possible to decipher all the content of the truth enlightenment, but it could take from 10 to over 10,000 years. If Zen had deciphered 50 more words in his spare time, Eastern Emperor Tai believed that at this speed, it wouldn't be long till he deciphered all of it. May I have a look? Eastern Emperor Tai asked, his voice trembling with eagerness. Zen obliged happily. He had intended to help him anyway, and he still had to tell him about the matter of the 9 Li race. As he saw it, he would exchange the truth enlightenment for his help. He just needed to see if Eastern Emperor Tai had the resolve and courage to assist him. Zen took out a pen and a paper and began writing. In a matter of moments, he had written the translation of the truth enlightenment. Eastern Emperor Tai took the paper and examined the words. He recited the words silently to himself, a strong sense of admiration washing over him. He then carefully folded the paper and said, Chiyu is lucky to have you as his grandson, but unfortunately. When the Nine Li race was destroyed, the Oneness Sky Palace was overtaken by tension and shock because of what happened. Eastern Emperor Tai felt sorry for them and that feeling had always lived in his heart. After the Nine Li race was destroyed, there were only 3 of the 4 great orthodox human forces left. It was obvious that the Oneness Sky Palace did not support the Bering race, and it seemed they would attack the Oneness Sky Palace sooner or later. Emperor Charm, who once had a good relationship with Eastern Emperor Tai, had turned his back on him. This was all part of the Bering race's plot. Hearing the sigh of Eastern Emperor Tai, Zen stood silently. What do you want? Eastern Emperor Tai suddenly asked. All swordsmen could benefit greatly from the truth enlightenment. Eastern Emperor Tai did not think Zen would give over the translation without asking for something in return. Eastern Emperor Tai had also just alluded to the Nine Li race, which must mean he had seen through Zen's thoughts and known what was coming. Since Eastern Emperor Tai had asked him directly, Zen answered him directly, I want to rebuild the Nine Li race and I wish for the Oneness Sky Palace to assist me. Eastern Emperor Tai was not surprised at all. He waved his hand and said, I can help you. The whole Oneness Sky Palace will help you, but not yet. Then, when will you help me? Zen asked. When the war between them fully begins, answered Eastern Emperor Tai. Most people would probably not know who, them, referred to. However, Zen had explored the dark region and he had inherited the civilization artifact. He also understood that those super forces in the source world were basically the spokespersons of certain civilizations. Does, them, you just talked about refer to the previous civilizations? Zen asked. You know of this? Eastern Emperor Tai was truly taken aback this time. He thought Zen, who had just reached stage 13, didn't even know the layout of the other shore. How could he know the existence of those civilizations? Several Oneness governors would from time to time report important information to Eastern Emperor Tai's soul fragment. But he still had no knowledge of the fact that Zen had stepped into the dark region, and that Elvenia had become a purified being. Chapter 2947, Leaving. Yes, I've heard of them, Zen responded along with a nod. In fact, he was not merely aware of them. He had the full support of the Regal Jade civilization, one of the top 10 civilizations. With Zen's improvements on the other shore, the Regal Jade civilization would have a far-reaching advantage if they were to join the games again. Meanwhile, Eastern Emperor Tai gazed deeply at Zen, as if deep in thought. Ever since the establishment of the Oneness Sky Palace, he had seen a number of young people with extraordinary strengths and talents. However, no one had ever come close to Zen's excellence. After their short discussion, Eastern Emperor Tai found that Zen kept many secrets, which made him feel that he could not see him through. You know much, but your cultivation is still too low, Eastern Emperor Tai muttered. But as you know, the chaotic source world will be open soon. For the other shore realm warriors, the chaotic source reinforcement is an important threshold they must cross. You must seize this opportunity. I have been fully prepared, replied Zen, bowing his head. He had said this but in actuality, he was a little confused. Based on Chance's performance, the corporeal body of the chaotic source realm proved to be very strong. However, if Zen absorbed a few more shade stones and used them to protect his body, he would surely have the physical strength as strong as those who went through the chaotic source reinforcement, maybe even stronger than them. Was it even necessary for the warriors at the other shore realm to undergo the chaotic source reinforcement? After a few minutes, Zen left Eastern Emperor Tai's place. Their meeting didn't last long, and Eastern Emperor Tai hadn't actually given Zen anything. But at the end of the day, Zen had gotten exactly what he wanted, namely Eastern Emperor Tai's promise. There had to be countless rare treasures and thurgies in the Oneness Sky Palace, but Zen wanted nothing to do with them. Moreover, he was not interested in garnering a bubble reputation. After Zen left, a person emerged from a corner in Eastern Emperor Tai's pavilion. The long cerise dress outlined her slim figure. It was Flamen. Your Majesty, why didn't you summon me but Zen after you woke up? Said Flamen, flustered and frustrated. Before Eastern Emperor Tai, she was a very gentle woman. My dear, you know very well of Zen's importance, Eastern Emperor Tai responded, taking her in his arms. If I get the truth enlightenment, I may be able to make a further breakthrough in swordsmanship. I'm sure you will make progress in swordsmanship sooner or later, she responded in a coquettish tone. Take your time. Eastern Emperor Tai shook his head. In fact, there is not much time left. At this very moment, a catastrophe is happening on the other shore. A catastrophe? Flamen gasped, holding her fingertips to her lips. Yes, I'm afraid they are eager for action. Eastern Emperor Tai's eyes revealed his worry. At this point, it doesn't matter if I die. But I can't bear to see the countless living creatures in the Bloom Divine Province suffer. In the several provinces under the jurisdiction of the Oneness Sky Palace, many clans were thriving with populations of at least 10 billion. If the Oneness Sky Palace became involved, how would these people ever be able to defend themselves? Flamen noticed the look on Eastern Emperor Tai's face and comforted him. They were born at this time, so they won't be able to escape such a catastrophe. If we lose, they will have nowhere to stay in the whole chaos, let alone the Bloom Divine Province. Unless they have the needed qualifications to hide on the other shore. The only shield in the chaos was the other shore. But who knew how many people could just hide on the other shore in a round of civilization? Even if we escape to the other shore, we may not escape death, Eastern Emperor Tai continued. Why is that? Flamen asked, wondering what could be so bad about the escape. Eastern Emperor Tai looked at her, seeing that she did not know much. They want to destroy everything, including the other shore. Flamen's eyes grew wide, her hands suddenly covering her mouth. What? That's crazy. Even if the chaos was destroyed, the Supreme Masters in the Source World would eventually have a way out. They could hide on the other shore to save themselves. This was the privilege of the strong. Flamen knew the consequences of destroying the other shore, so this idea took her by surprise. I will not discuss this now. Eastern Emperor Tai shook his head, changing the subject. Several days ago, you said you wanted to talk with me. What's the matter? In fact, Flamen was going to ask Eastern Emperor Tai for help. She was at a loss of what to do with Elvinia. But when she needed help, Eastern Emperor Tai was still on the other shore. Flamen smiled and said, don't worry about it. Elvinia has recovered well. Elvinia, what happened to her? Eastern Emperor Tai asked with concern. He was always concerned about his youngest daughter, Elvinia, who had extraordinary talents. She has become a purified being, Flamen said. A purified being? Eastern Emperor Tai was stunned by the news. He knew exactly what purified being meant. A purified being was a powerhouse who ruled an entire stage on the other shore. Yes, Flamen nodded. How could this be possible? Purified beings only come from the other shore. How did Elvinia become one? This surprised Eastern Emperor Tai. Actually, Zen has something to do with it, said Flamen. It's him again. After Eastern Emperor Tai departed from the other shore, he was able to gather interesting information that had something to do with Zen. Zen's name appeared too many times for him to forget it. It's a long story, Flamen expressed. But I'll make sure to explain it to you in detail. When Zen returned to the Heavenly Cultivation Palace, he saw that Nellie, Lavender, and Laquisha had packed their clothes and were about to leave. After everything that happened with Jean, it was pointless for them to stay at the Phoenix Palace. However, just as they approached the gate of the Heavenly Cultivation Palace, Elvinia suddenly appeared before them. You have recovered? Zen asked with a genuine smile. Elvinia's posture was tall, and her expression was as cold as ice. She wore a long blue dress, looking quite elegant and sophisticated. It was hard to read her, especially with coldness in her blue eyes. The memory flame recorded everything. After Teague's memory was removed, her memory had been completely restored. This made everything clear to her, especially the incident in the dark region. Recalling that she had followed Zen like a little puppy, she blushed in embarrassment. Little Master, you've finally recovered. Nellie, Laquisha and Lavender were happy to see Elvinia healthy and well, most especially because of Elvinia's kindness towards them all. It seems that you're heading somewhere. Elvinia blinked, looking at all the bags they carried. Are you leaving? Yes, Laquisha responded. Thanks to you in these days, our cultivation base has improved by leaps and bounds. But we seem to have offended Lady Jean, and we don't want to cause more trouble by staying in the Phoenix Palace. Lady Jean, what happened? Elvinia frowned. She was unaware of this. When you were gone, Nellie told Elvinia what had happened recently. After hearing Nellie's explanation, Elvinia felt a chill come over her. Chance, Ahmad, they are quite bold, she sneered. No descendants of the Phoenix Palace ever dared to offend Elvinia. Even a chaotic source realm cultivator like Chance would make a detour if he ever came across her. Little did she know that they started a fight when she was gone. Chapter 2948, The Ticket. Elvenia accepted them as disciples just on a whim, not formally. But after some time, they developed quite a good relationship. Now, when Elvenia saw that Nelly and the other two were going to leave soon, sadness overcame her. "There's no need for you to leave," she said, like an afterthought. But Nelly gave Zen a look. Before the latter could say anything, Elvenia walked up to take Nelly's hand and stood before Lavender and Laquisha. She glared at Zen coldly and said, "Although I can't call myself their master, we've been getting along well these days. You can't just take them with you." Elvenia's behavior both angered and amused Zen in return. He knew that at the beginning, she took them to the Phoenix Palace with an ulterior motive. "I've offended Lady Jean. If they stay in the Phoenix Palace, I can't guarantee their safety," Zen said calmly. The narrow-minded Jean carried much resentment in her heart. Since she couldn't take it out on Zen, she was likely to cause Nelly, Lavender, and Laquisha some trouble. Zen didn't want to allow that to happen. "I promise I'll keep them safe and sound at the palace," Elvenia assured him. "How? When the chaotic source world opens, won't you also leave the Oneness Sky Palace? How will you protect them then?" Zen questioned skeptically. "I will leave them to my mother, and I won't let anything happen to them," Elvenia said firmly. Turning to Lavender and the other two, she said softly, "Please stay in the Phoenix Palace." Elvenia's determination piqued Zen's curiosity. It seemed the damage to her memory flame somehow affected her personality as well. When Laquisha, Nelly, and Lavender heard Elvenia's request, they exchanged uncertain glances. "Zen," Nelly then uttered, "we'd better stay at the Phoenix Palace for now." Seeing Elvenia's sincerity, the three felt unwilling to leave. Pursing his lips, Zen merely shrugged and agreed. Although he could give them good cultivation resources, he knew that they could learn a lot more at the Phoenix Palace than with him. If Elvenia was that certain she could take care of them, then Zen would let them have that opportunity. After he returned to the Flow Sword sect, Zen began sorting out the other shore tokens he had obtained in the Dark Region. In addition to the civilization artifact, the two hearts of accomplice along with the regal jade beast Elvenia had killed were the most precious objects. Upon their death, the regal jade creatures would turn into statues which served as their corpses. If Zen fused with the statue, it would greatly strengthen the defense level of his physical body. He could even transform into a regal jade body. This was known as an auxiliary type of other shore token. Such an other shore token was indeed rare, but Zen could only fuse with 3 other shore tokens. The Strength God Totem was responsible for his power's eruption, the Demonic Eye could disturb his opponent's mind at the most critical moments, and the Civilization Artifact served as Zen's core token. The 3 of them were indispensable, so before entering the Desire World, he did not intend to replace any of them. The 2 hearts of accomplice were even more precious. Zen had Dorothy give one of the 2 to the Origin Mountain, planning to keep the other. After Winchell knew of the matter, he, Athamar, and Goran went to purchase it right away. It was an important item for a super force, it was only natural that Athamar and the rest were eager to possess it. Such a token could give one the ability to kill a top-level opponent by sacrificing their own life. While it was a powerful weapon for a super force, it wasn't exactly suitable for Zen's needs. He would have never allowed his companions to fuse with it at the cost of their lives. Before the opening of the chaotic source world, Zen began his cultivation as well. It wasn't particularly difficult to comprehend the blood essence godly way, but fusing it with the other godly ways was another matter. While he had enough time, Zen still had extreme difficulty fusing successfully. Zen also needed to enter the Flow Tower to cultivate the Flow Swordsmanship. But with Letitia and Margaret's company, it seemed as though time went by too fast. After 2 months, Milo finally recovered and returned. The last time he used a secret skill, his soul was damaged severely, putting him in a long-lasting coma. The Flow Sword sect poured many efforts into his recovery, paying a great price for it. He then began his cultivation in seclusion after visiting Zen. Now, there were only 2 months left before the chaotic source world was open to the public. Naturally, Milo wasn't willing to miss the opportunity, so he wasted no time improving his cultivation base and strength. During this period of time, the atmosphere in the Oneness Sky Palace became quiet. Almost all of the disciples who had reached stage 13 were cultivating. A ticket to the chaotic source world was highly precious, the Oneness Sky Palace wasn't exempted from striving hard for more tickets. But in the end, they couldn't garner enough. A bulk would be eliminated and couldn't go to the chaotic source world. Of course, no one wanted to come across that misfortune. And it wasn't only the Oneness Sky Palace, all the super forces in the source world were facing a similar situation. Even these super forces had competed for the tickets behind the scenes. Some small clans and forces bought the tickets even when the prices spiked up sky high in the black market of the ear mouse race. In the Black Mountain Guild, the stink lingered atop the Black Mountain. Numerous corpses were piled up there, forming a little mountain of their own. They belonged to huge beetles, evil wolves, and other creatures of various strange shapes. When they were alive, all these creatures were extraordinarily strong, having reached at least the 12th or 13th stage of the Other Shore realm. But they had all fallen during the vicious battle on the Black Mountain. Awoo! With a final, great roar, a huge fierce ape rushed toward the evil god. Even as the ape was severely injured, it was unwilling to accept the fact. So long as it killed the human being in front of it, it could gain the ticket to the chaotic source world. Another step and it could succeed. The evil god watched the approaching fierce ape with a wicked smile. When he pointed at it gently, his soul aura burst from his body. It was extraordinarily strong. It flowed and rushed toward the fierce ape. The moment the creature was enveloped by the aura, it almost lost itself. Why is his soul of light so powerful? In the ape's confusion, it felt a sharp pain at the back of its head. Its consciousness was then smashed in an instant. Its huge and strong head fell to pieces. The evil god merely stepped on the ape's corpse and continued up to the peak of the mountain. Now, he alone stood proudly on the Black Mountain. The monsters and beasts of the Black Mountain Guild all looked up at him from afar. "It's too easy," said the evil god as he stood atop the mountain. He then took out the token of the Black Mountain Guild and crushed it in his hand with pride. Looking up to the sky, he mumbled, "Will you be late?" The black ship was approaching him from the sky. It was moving rapidly, almost ominously. When it stopped right by the Black Mountain, Shira, clad in a long black dress, descended from it and stopped right above the evil god. "Don't stand above me," growled the evil god. "Cut the garbage, take it and come with us." Without another word, she threw a black card at him. It was a ticket to the chaotic source world. Chapter 2949, Arrival. The ticket to the chaotic source world was actually a slice of divine crystal which was cut in a very clever manner. 4 small runes that were drawn on the ticket absorbed the internal divine crystal energy and spread it around. If any of its corners was damaged, the entire ticket would be broken into pieces. It was safe to say that since the ticket to the chaotic source world was too precious, many creatures had dared to make copies of it. That was why the tickets were made in such a clever way, to prevent plagiarism. The evil god held the ticket close to his face, then looked at it with a critical eye. He had suffered a lot during his time in the Black Mountain Guild, especially when he was a newcomer. Some warriors at the Other Shore realm had even subdued him too much with their Other Shore tokens. Yet, he never yielded. In fact, he had even made rapid progress in just a short amount of time. Eventually, he had gotten to either defeat or kill those who had once repressed him. He had gone through so much for just this little ticket. He casually tucked it into the space ring and said, "Is there any way to get me a space ring on the Other Shore? I got so many Other Shore tokens but I can't take them away. What a pity." It was actually easy to create Sumeru space on the Other Shore. The superpowers usually raised thunder beasts in their temples and they all had their own unique technology to make space rings. The only thing was Evil God had always acted on his own and had no contact with the others on the Other Shore. Who would make a space ring for him? He had wanted to rush into the temples and force them to carve a space ring for him. But to his disappointment, they had set up restriction against the outsiders in their temples. No matter how strong his soul of light was, there was nothing he could do. Therefore, he had no choice but to throw away many tokens he'd obtained on the Other Shore, save for some extremely valuable ones that were hidden in his soul of light. That was really a great pity for him. When Shira heard his words, she glanced contemptuously at him and said, "The Other Shore tokens obtained in the Lust World are just rubbish. It's not a waste to throw them away. Besides, we don't have any allies in the Lust World." The black ship had a very small population, but each of its members was a peerless master. They wouldn't have gone to the Lust World if it weren't for some special reasons. "No, you are rubbish," Evil God spat back. He truly hated it when others doubted him. It was just like his time in the Black Mountain Guild all over again, wherein he killed anyone who ever dared to question him. Suddenly, Shira turned around. Her eyes glittered coldly under her sleek, black bangs. If it was another man who had provoked her like this, she would have killed him already. But now, she resisted the urge to tear Evil God up despite his arrogance. Then, she reached out to pinch in the air above Evil God. "Evil God, who was an arrogant and invincible man in the Black Mountain Guild, was deformed by her squeeze without any ability to resist. After that, Shira threw him abruptly into the black ship. The ship then started to speed up to the west. At the same time, Athamar kept his promise and gave Zen a pile of tickets. Zen held a pile of black cards in hand, which emitted a faint aura of divine crystal. The Oneness Sky Palace didn't get many tickets to the chaotic source world this time. Moreover, all the sects of the 7 mountains had to share the tickets. As a result, the Flow Sword sect got less. It wasn't easy for Athamar to get 7 tickets for him. This ticket is so elaborate, Zen muttered to himself as he walked towards the house opposite to his. As the opening time of the chaotic source world approached, Hutton, Sally and the others became more and more nervous. That day, Athamar just promised that he would try his best to get the tickets, but all of them clearly knew how rare the tickets were. Hutton, what if the Oneness Sky Palace can't get us tickets? Sally asked worriedly. Hutton, who sat on the couch in the courtyard, shook his head and said, we have no choice but to wait for the charity from them now. Then Grandpa's hope would be deflated. We'd gain nothing from our journey. Came Umar's cold rebuttal. When Hutton saw that Umar had gotten a little mad, he reminded, don't forget that the Oneness Sky Palace doesn't owe us anything. They helped us for the sake of Zen. It's not their duty to give us tickets. But Zen, Umar said defiantly. Just then, the door to the house was pushed open. Restrictions had been set up in front of the door, so ordinary people couldn't open it. They knew it must be Zen who had come in. Young master, Hutton suddenly stood up. Zen, Sally greeted him with a smile. To be honest, Zen felt a little lightheaded when he was addressed in such a way. Yet since Hutton insisted, he didn't correct him anymore. It wouldn't work on him anyway. Everyone of the 9 Li race looked nervous, and Zen naturally understood why. A smile appeared on his face. With a flick of his hand, a few black cards appeared in his palm. Are you waiting for them? Once he revealed the stack of black cards, the others immediately went wild with joy. The matter had worried them deeply over the past few days. Now that they'd gotten the tickets, they could finally sigh in relief. After all, they weren't that confident in Zen as they hadn't had much contact with him before. But Zen took his responsibility to help them since it was Ambrose who had brought them here in person. If Athamar or even the Oneness Sky Palace couldn't get them tickets, Zen would buy enough from the ear mice. Young master, Hutton tried to say something to show his gratitude, but he was speechless. Zen waved his hand and said, since we are from the same race, you don't need to be too polite with me. There's only a month left. We're going to set off after we finish preparations. The tickets to the chaotic source world were distributed to various sects in succession. It wasn't easy for other disciples of the Oneness Sky Palace to obtain even one. Although Milo and Zen could get the tickets directly, the others of the Flow Sword sect needed to compete for the remaining 10 ones. In addition, the Unique Array Sword sect and the Killing Sword sect also fell into a fierce competition because of those tickets. Even the direct descendants had to win the competition to prove their strength before they could get the tickets. A month later, a gentle wind blew through the sails of the 7 giant flying ships as they slowly rose up. Soon enough, they had left the Oneness Sky Palace and flew westward. The 7 flying ships belonged to the 7 mountains of the Oneness Sky Palace, and the one that led them belonged to the Oneness Mountain. Of course, disciples from the Phoenix Palace and the 3 sword sects were in it. To get to the chaotic source world, they had to cross over 100 provinces. Even if the flying ships could penetrate space, they still had to pass through the walls between provinces when they reached the boundaries. Since they had to pause for a moment, it was clearly impossible for them to travel too fast. Inside the huge flying ships were hundreds of cubicles that were arranged neatly. Even though the disciples from the Oneness Sky Palace were on the journey, they still continued to cultivate themselves tirelessly. At the end of the day, the competition in the chaotic source world was also extremely fierce. Not everyone who entered it could get through the chaotic source reinforcement. Disciples from the Oneness Sky Palace either cultivated their souls of light on the other shore, consolidated their own sword theurgy, or practiced the use of their newly fused other shore tokens. Half a month later, the 7 flying ships of the Oneness Sky Palace came out of the space barrier and entered a snow-filled world. Once they reached the cold place, all the disciples from the Oneness Mountain went up to the deck to have a bird's-eye view of the area covered with snow and ice. Zen leaned on the rail as the chilly air caressed his face. They had now arrived at the icy snow province, where the chaotic source world was located. Chapter 2950, A Huge Black Egg. The icy snow province belonged to the Pear Hill. 11 provinces were under its jurisdiction, all of them lined up. Among the 11 provinces, the icy snow province was the farthest from the Pear Hill. Back then, the super forces had allied and forced the Pear Hill to hand over the chaotic source spirits. The Pear Hill couldn't bear the pressure and chose to compromise instead. The super forces also required placing the chaotic source world in the center of the source world. But the Pear Hill firmly refused. After several rounds of discussion, they finally gave up the icy snow province, turning it into a public area where the chaotic source world was placed. Some super forces knew it was a long way to go, so half a year ago, they already set off. The Oneness Sky Palace was relatively close to the icy snow province, so it had only taken half a month to arrive. The temperature in the icy snow province was extremely low. An ordinary mortal could turn into an ice sculpture in mere seconds. But for powerful warriors at the other shore realm, the temperature remained normal. Even under such harsh conditions, many big cities were built in the icy snow province. As they approached the destination, many disciples of the Oneness Sky Palace grew excited. They gathered in pairs and trios to chat away and exchange information about the chaotic source world. Although this was their first time to enter the chaotic source world, some elders of the Oneness Sky Palace had offered them some tips. Although they all belonged to the Oneness Mountain, the 4 factions were greatly different from each other. The direct descendants of the Phoenix Palace were the most arrogant. They occupied the very front of the flying ship. One of them even announced, "All of us from the Phoenix Palace must unite as one in the chaotic source world." But my elder brother said that those chaotic source spirits are scattered. "I'm afraid it'll be difficult to capture them if we hold together," another disciple retorted. "It depends. Some other races are pretty violent. They'll start killing us mindlessly the moment we enter." The Killing Sword Sect and the Unique Array Sword Sect occupied the center of the flying ship, while the members of the Flow Sword Sect stayed in the rear with Milo and Connor in the lead. Although the 6 members of the 9 Li race were also on the ship, they made sure not to go out onto the deck because of their sensitive identity. Zen stood on the side of the ship. Snowflakes whirled in the sky like a myriad of loose feathers. They dissipated before his eyes. The chaotic source world is a barrier that all the warriors at the other shore realm must face. Yan should be there too. "I wonder if we will meet this time," Zen muttered to himself. He had stayed in the source world for many years. After losing contact with Emily and the rest, he never saw them again. Looking at the vast snow scene, he felt a faint sadness come over his heart. At this time, a snow-white hand stretched out from Zen's right and caught a snowflake ever so gently. Gradually, it melted in the hand. Zen turned around to find Elvinia standing behind him. Her appearance caught everyone's attention. She had always been as cold as ice. No one dared to get close to her. "My father told me you must be careful in the chaotic source world," Elvinia said, watching the white snow in the distance. "Eastern Emperor Tai." Zen's eyes flashed. Elvinia nodded in agreement. "The Bering race will never give up on killing you. Sure, they don't know who you are, but I'm pretty sure they will come to the chaotic source world and take actions against you." The corporeal body on the other shore was a great hindrance for them. Now, Zen was formidable in all the 13 stages. What if he one day reached the desire world and the higher stages beyond it? It was something none of the Bering race ever wanted to see. There were no rules in the chaotic source world. They could kill anyone on a whim. The Oneness Sky Palace and the Bering race had made it to the brink of war. If the Bering race were to confirm that Thad was a disciple of the Oneness Sky Palace, they'd most likely work with the Sun Crow race and the Divine Farmer race in slaughtering all the disciples from the palace. This ruthless slaughter would ensure Thad's death. They can't do that, can they? Zen asked with a smile. Everything is possible, Elvinia said in a serious tone. What about you? Zen asked. As a purified being, Elvinia had a physical body on the other shore. Everyone could see her face clearly. This made her very easy to spot. Not being able to hide her identity, she was even more conspicuous than Zen. Compared to him, she was in more danger. Elvinia blinked and bared an innocent smile. "You've promised to protect me." The smile on her flawless face somehow touched Zen. Although she had regained her memory, her journey in the dark region undoubtedly had a great influence on her. She had become even more approachable. But Zen didn't know she acted normally when he wasn't around. Because of Laquisha, Nellie, and Lavender, Elvinia taught the direct descendants of the Phoenix Palace a lesson. The disciples who were to enter the chaotic source world kept their mouths shut when she was around. Right, she added. Of course, Zen said with a helpless nod. Elvinia pursed her lips in response before pointing to the front. Look. A huge ring-like mountain appeared before them. Outside it was a land of ice and snow while its interior was covered in a layer of black mist. The entire mountain was covered in an enchanted barrier that spanned over 3 million miles. From afar, it resembled a huge black egg. It was none other than the chaotic source world. There were over 1,000 huge stone pillars standing in front of the chaotic source world. Each one was engraved with the name of a superforce. The flying ship of the Oneness Mountain flew toward its pillar and stopped right by it. The flying ships of the other 6 mountains, including the Origin Mountain, the Golden Mountain, and the Bright Mountain, also stopped by the pillar one after another. Many flying ships parked beside the pillars. Some were covered in snow. It seemed like they had been there for a long time. The disciples of the 7 mountains of the Oneness Sky Palace came down from the flying ships one after another before gathering. The 6 Nine-Li people followed closely behind Zen. Seeing them, Connor and the others thought it was rather strange. They didn't belong to the Flow Sword sect. How did they get there by the flying ship? Curious as they were, no one bothered asking questions. For each team, a powerful figure was appointed to lead them. Athamar was appointed for the Oneness Mountain, while Winchell was chosen for the Origin Mountain. After flying past the many stone pillars under Athamar's leadership, they saw a huge, open area in front of them. The snow had been cleared out and the creatures of many races had occupied their respective corners. Chapter 2951, Large Races Gathered. Zen's gaze swept around the spacious square, and landed at some giant figures standing on the left side of the area. "They are the Separate Abyss race," he muttered. He had previously seen the Separate Abyss race on the other shore several times. Although he wasn't able to see clearly how they looked back then on the other shore, the silhouettes of their souls of light showed the outline of their figures. Thus, he had recognized them in one glance. The members of the Separate Abyss race were all 70 to 80 feet tall, which made them look like small mountains when they stood there. Every single one of them wore a special layer of golden armor. Their big eyes emitted a strong malicious aura, that they even looked down on everything quite condescendingly as they gazed around. They were born with huge size and strong bodies. They were indeed superior to other races in terms of physical strength, which was why they were extremely arrogant. Not far from them were the ear mice who sat up straight on the ground. All of them wore masks and kept silent. They were much more low-key. Everyone else thought that the ear mice weren't that strong when it came to combat strength, but that was because they rarely had conflicts with other races. They preferred to use divine crystals and soul pills to solve everything. Furthermore, Zen's observation of them on the other shore indicated that their combat strength shouldn't actually be underestimated. After all the best other shore tokens were traded through their dealings, so the other shore tokens they had merged with naturally couldn't be bad. Aside from those 2 races, there were also the Rain race, the Celestial Wolf race, the Purple Ape race, and so on. Generally speaking, one could tell the strength of a certain race from the number of creatures they had. The stronger a race was, the higher authority they had, and the more tickets they could get. For example, there were more than 500 warriors of the Separate Abyss race. They currently had the largest number of warriors present. Thus, they obviously obtained the highest number of tickets to the chaotic source world. On the other hand, the small races like the Celestial Wolf race and the Purple Ape race, with about only 20 to 30 members, had a relatively weak overall strength. The average super forces could get more than 200 tickets, but this time, only a total of more than 180 warriors from the 7 mountains of the Oneness Sky Palace had come. It meant that as of now, they were disadvantaged when it came to the distribution of tickets. Once Athamar had entered the square, he cupped his hands towards the large races. Then, he found a corner and instructed the disciples of the Oneness Sky Palace to wait there. The disciples of the Oneness Sky Palace sat on the ground with their legs crossed. They looked around just like Zen. Of course, they couldn't help it because the creatures present were their potential competitors. Not long after the disciples sat down, another whooshing sound came from the sky. Dozens of flying ships flew across the clouds. One of them was so shockingly enormous that it looked like a floating city instead of a ship. In the center of this flying ship was a huge bear painted on the surface. "The warriors of the bearing race have come," whispered the disciples of the Oneness Sky Palace. Hutton, Sally and the other 9 Li members had been silently following behind Zen. When they saw the flying ship, which was as huge as a city, their curious looks turned into trepidation. They had never seen the bearing race in the real world. This was their first time to meet them. To be honest, they had already subconsciously regarded the bearing race as a terrifying opponent. Now that they saw their grand entrance, they felt the fear and pressure rise in their hearts even more. The most affected one was Sally, who unknowingly squeezed in beside Zen. When Zen felt that Sally became a little nervous, his lips moved slightly and using his chaotic energy, he told her, the Bering race are also humans like us. Don't be afraid. But they have killed so many of our 9Li people, Sally answered through her life vitality. Of course, blood will have blood. Fear can't solve anything, said Zen. The journey of cultivation was like going through a single log bridge. No matter how high one stood, they had to get rid of the fear from below, otherwise, they would fall down and die. Therefore, it was very important to keep calm and have a strong belief in oneself. But they are very powerful, Sally lamented. You'll become more powerful one day, Zen said with a smile. Sally bowed her head and thought for a while. Then, she looked up again and determination flashed faintly in her beautiful eyes. In fact, she was a very optimistic girl. It was just that the environment where she grew up in had always depicted the Bering race as a horrible enemy. Now, Zen also knew that it was hard for him to reduce the fear of the remaining members of the 9Li race with only a few words. However, he only needed to prove that Bering race were not invincible, and the fear in their hearts would be easily dissolved. Soon enough, the flying ships had descended and the members of the Bering race flew over through the stone pillars. The warrior at the helm was an old man with a straight back. His eyes glinted fiercely and his every move indicated that he was vigorous and strong. He also cupped his hands towards the many large races, then led the members of the Bering race to a corner. After the arrival of the Bering race, the members of the Sun Crow race, New Moon race, and the Divine Farmer race all followed one after another. Over the years, the power of the human race, with the Bering race as the leading force, had continued to expand. The human race, which had originally appeared to be the weaker ones, now had the tendency to surpass the other super races. If the few superpowers of human race were to unite, their strength would probably surpass that of the separate Abyss race. The Sun Crow race's leader was Elizabeth. She sauntered towards the front, her slender waist swaying lithely as she did so. A pure, golden pair of wings fluttered gently behind her back and overall, she exuded a breathtaking charm. All the creatures present focused their eyes on her. Meanwhile, the sight of Elizabeth caused Zen to frown a little. This woman's illusory projection had almost killed him back when he was in the mountain viewing province. He didn't expect to meet her again this time. However, they were at the entrance of the chaotic source world, and he had nothing to fear since he had the elders like Athamar to protect him. After Elizabeth had walked around the square once, she walked towards them with a cold smile on her face. This prompted Athamar to step forward and stand in front of the disciples. He cupped his hands towards Elizabeth and said, "Master Elizabeth, I wonder what you came here for." Elizabeth's gaze landed on Elvinia, and with a smile she spoke, "Nothing. I just want to see the traitor of our Sun Crow race. She will actually accept the chaotic source reinforcement today. How time flies." Elvinia's face darkened upon hearing those words. She stood up and hissed, "Dare you say it again?" The years Elvinia had spent in the divine lair were nightmares that she would never want to look back all her life, but Elizabeth actually took the initiative to provoke her. Naturally, she was furious. "Elizabeth, watch your mouth," Athamar warned. He too, was displeased. All of them gathered for one purpose, to enter the chaotic source world, and not to stir up trouble. Still, Elizabeth ignored him and continued, "I didn't say anything wrong. Your mother is a traitor, and you are a traitor as well. It's fine if you continue to hide in the Oneness Sky Palace like your mother. Since you dared to come to the chaotic source world, you must be mentally prepared for the fact that you might not be able to come back." The light in Elvinia's eyes dimmed further. Just as she was about to retort, Zen suddenly stopped her and said, "There is no need to be so worked up on these birds." Elizabeth hadn't noticed Zen at first. As soon as she saw Zen, she remembered that moment in the mountain viewing province. Her face suddenly turned sour. "It's you." She had performed the illusory projection several times to kill Zen, but he had successfully escaped each time, so he left a deep impression on her. At that time, however, Zen had only recently stepped onto the other shore. Therefore, she was surprised that he would now be able to accept chaotic source reinforcement after just a short amount of time. Chapter 2952, Target. At that moment, Elvinia's anger turned into confusion. She was curious as to how Elizabeth knew Zen. "Yes, it's me," Zen replied with a faint smile. Since he had promised Flamen to protect Elvinia, he had to take some of the pressure off of her. Besides, Elizabeth immediately targeted the Oneness Sky Palace the moment she arrived. It was indeed too much. Back then, Zen had taken the Shade Stone, which caused Elizabeth to hold a grudge against him ever since. It would have been more acceptable if it was a master like Athamar who had done such a thing, but the person who had snatched the Shade Stone away was a young man, a nobody, and Elizabeth felt greatly ashamed. Moreover, he didn't even avoid her at all when he had faced her today. Instead, he even had the guts to stand up for Elvenia and call her a bird. He was too bold. Do you really think that because someone is protecting you, you can be safe all the time? She snarled murderously as a scorching soul aura spread from her being. In turn, the disciples sitting on the ground stepped back when they sensed her strong aura. She was so arrogant and domineering that she completely ignored the leaders of the 7 mountains. Even the usually calm Athamar looked visibly angry now. He released a sharp soul aura, which turned into a wall in front of the disciples as a response. Then, he declared, "Elizabeth, if you want to make a move, our Oneness Sky Palace is ready for a fight." At that point, Winchell and the elders of the other 5 mountains started to gather their strength. More and more powerful auras filled the space. Oh, Elizabeth's lips stretched into a thin smile. "We're more than happy to see that the Oneness Sky Palace is ready to fight. Should we find a place then?" As soon as she finished speaking, the old leader of the Bearing race, a few leaders of the Divine Farmer race and the New Moon race all stepped out and stood beside Elizabeth. The chaotic source world hadn't even opened yet, but the atmosphere already became too tense. Unfortunately, anyone with a keen eye could see that the Oneness Sky Palace was at a disadvantage. In fact, Eastern Emperor Tai had already expected this to happen. It became worse especially because Zen had anonymously destroyed the temple of the Bearing race. Thus, the Bearing race had every reason to hate him to the core and desire to eliminate him as soon as possible. Moreover, they had already known that Elvenia had a physical body on the other shore. Now, the truth was they had already discussed their plans for their arrival before they set out. Elizabeth would show up first to provoke them. Hopefully the Oneness Sky Palace would bite the bait, as it was exactly what they wanted to see. If they tolerated it, however, then they would have still achieved their goal of discouraging the morale of the disciples of the Oneness Sky Palace, and they could just come back to it after they had entered the chaotic source world. This trip to the chaotic source world was also the start of their plan to completely cut ties with the Oneness Sky Palace. What is going on inside the human race? They are having an internal conflict? I think so. Ha 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 ha. A few members of the separate Abyss race watched them and laughed. Over the years, the human race had risen very fast, especially the Bearing race, which had grown to a point that even the separate Abyss race and other large races had to take them seriously. From the looks of it, the Bearing race simply wanted to get rid of the Oneness Sky Palace as soon as possible, which was what the non-human races wanted as well. It's against the rules to fight here. As long as Pear Hill doesn't interfere, it doesn't matter what they do. I'm afraid the Oneness Sky Palace will be doomed. Upon hearing those words, Athamar, Winchell, and the rest of them went pale with shock. They knew it was not realistic to fight in the Icy Snow Province. Left with no choice, the Pear Hill had made the Icy Snow Province a public province. Still, they had set rules when they made the decision. One of the rules was that it was forbidden to fight in the Icy Snow Province. Unfortunately, none of the warriors from the Pear Hill showed up. If Elizabeth and the powerful masters who supported her really made a move now that they were outside the chaotic source world, all the Oneness Sky Palace disciples present would probably be killed. Even Athamar, Winchell, and the other leaders of the mountains might not be able to protect themselves. The Oneness Sky Palace is very famous and they claim they have the best swordsmanship. But, it's actually a place where all the cowards have gathered. Ha ha ha. That human force is made up of a group of weak warriors. What do you expect of them? They are actually so weak to such an extent. They are simply wasting those tickets. Why don't they just give them to other worthy people? Taunts and jeers from the Bearing race began to fill the air. The disciples of the Oneness Sky Palace were naturally furious, but they knew better than to refute in such a situation. Now, what do you think about my suggestion? Elizabeth asked Athamar as she looked at him with a charming smile. Just as Athamar was caught in a dilemma, a loud thud interrupted his thoughts. A man suddenly fell from the sky and smashed into the ground. The man wore a black cloak and because he crashed against the floor, they couldn't see his face clearly. He got up after a few moments and once the crowd had a clear view of him, their curiosity became surprise. It was human sovereign, Fuxi. It was known that he had disappeared from the source world for a very long time. No one knew where he had gone, and someone even asserted that he had died in some place within the chaos. No one expected that he would appear on the day when the chaotic source world was about to open. It wasn't until he stood up straight that everyone noticed that he held a wine jar in his hand. His eyes glazed over and he seemed intoxicated. He slowly walked towards Elizabeth's direction. However, he completely ignored her and the powerful masters from the Bearing race and the Divine Farmer race who stood behind her. Human sovereign, Athamar muttered. He looked at Fuxi respectfully and gave him a salute. Both Athamar and Winchell were confused. They had no idea what on earth Fuxi was up to. Once again, everyone was surprised when Fuxi ignored Athamar and directly went past him. Instead, he took a single step and floated towards Zen like a ghost. He slung an arm over Zen's shoulder as he said, "Hey young man, we met again." Zen had once experienced the powerful strength of this man back when he was in the bottom of the chaos. Now that he had reached stage 13 of the other shore and that his soul of light had become more powerful and sensitive, Fuxi still gave him the feeling that his strength was incomparably unfathomable. "Yes, what a coincidence," Zen replied calmly. "Humph, coincidence. I've been waiting for you all this time, but you are too late. You haven't accepted the chaotic source reinforcement yet. How long are you going to let me wait?" Fuxi's question puzzled Zen. "Why are you waiting for me?" Zen asked back. "Of course, to kill you and replace you when the right time comes," said Fuxi with a grin. Despite the smile on Fuxi's face and his drunken state, there was a hint of seriousness in his glassy eyes. Zen's heart skipped a beat. This fellow didn't seem to be joking. Of course, he didn't know Fuxi's long-cherished wish. After Fuxi had figured out the Chaos Ancient God's intentions, he began to take Zen seriously as his target. Though Zen had grown at a very outrageous speed, he was still too slow in Fuxi's eyes. The others who were present were dumbfounded, as they had no idea what Fuxi was talking about. His strength could definitely allow him to kill Zen with just one finger, so why would he wait until Zen had grown really strong? Furthermore, even if Zen would really grow with his power, could he become as powerful as a man like Fuxi in the future? Elizabeth and those who stood around her were also baffled. Fuxi appeared so suddenly and unexpectedly, and they didn't know what to do next. At that moment, Fuxi turned towards Elizabeth and the others, then said, "Remember, I don't care about what you do in the chaotic source world, but if anyone dares to fight in the icy snow province, I won't show any mercy." Chapter 2953, Threat. Fuxi was not shouting, but his words were audible enough for everyone to hear clearly. Then, there was a moment of dead silence. The icy snow province used to be a part of the Pear Hill, so it was close to it. Meanwhile, the strongest warriors of the super forces, such as the Sun Crow race, the Bearing race, and the separate Abyss race didn't come. Everyone was anxious as they knew the price of disobedience. Even Elizabeth couldn't contain her anger. Her goal was to give the Oneness Sky Palace a fatal head-on blow to weaken their morale. The news that arrived from the other shore frustrated the members of the Sun Crow race and the Bearing race. The man named Thad had attacked these several super forces relentlessly, but they could do nothing to him. However, Elizabeth didn't expect that Fuxi himself would show up personally. "Human sovereign, does this mean that we can fight outside the icy snow province?" Elizabeth asked as she gnashed her teeth. She thought that if Emperor Charm of the Sun Crow race, the Yellow Thirk of the Bearing race, and the Divine Farmer were here, they might not succumb in fear to Fuxi. Nonetheless, they were in Fuxi's territory now, so they had no choice but to yield for the time being. "Yeah, that's right," Fuxi shrugged, with a fierce glint in his eyes. He stared at Elizabeth and continued, "But I have to warn you about one thing. If anyone dares to lay a finger on this young man, death will be the consequence." Zen was the one chosen by the Chaos Ancient God, so Fuxi certainly wouldn't let anyone else kill him. Of course, Fuxi knew that it wouldn't be easy to bring Zen down. He just deliberately advised Elizabeth and the others not to use any underhanded tricks on his watch. As they heard Fuxi's threat, everyone was taken aback. Elizabeth's face changed, just as the leaders of the other races. The younger generation who were present also became confused. What's so amazing about him? Why does the human sovereign protect him to that degree? Didn't you hear? It's because Fuxi regards him as his rival. Of course he won't let anyone else lay a finger on him. What? How could he be a rival of the human sovereign? That's insane. Those who were about to enter the chaotic source world were all shocked. Even if they had managed to undergo the chaotic source reinforcement and improve their strength to a higher level, they were still considered weak in the source world where many extremely powerful people dwelled. Even Athamar and Elizabeth could kill them effortlessly, let alone Fuxi. They were all actually in the 13th stage of the other shore realm. It was impossible that there was a huge gap in strength between them. At the same time, a huge flying ship had arrived. At the sight of the flying ship, a faint smile appeared in Fuxi's drunk face. "Here comes your sister," Fuxi told Zen as he patted him on the shoulder. "Sister? Did he just say that Zen has a sister? And this sister that he's talking about is from the Pear Hill?" Elvinia's eyes widened in shock. Even Dorothy was puzzled. She knew Zen's origin, but she didn't know that he had a connection with the Pear Hill. Athamar and Winchell glared at Zen while letting out a stifled bitter laugh. They thought that Zen, a surviving descendant of the Nine Li race, had no one to back him up. Supposedly, his full loyalty would be to the Oneness Sky Palace. With the turn of events, they realized that they underestimated him. Only Sally, Hutton, and the other Nine Li people knew of the truth because of the information that Leopold had told them. The Pear Hill's flying ship didn't stop beside the stone pillars but continuously floated in the air. Not long after, several hundred beings were seen jumping out of the flying ship. They turned out to be the members of the Snake Goddess race. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The Pear Hill was comprised of the Snake Goddess race and some humans who had the blood of the Snake Goddess race, like Emily. These half-blood members, though belonging to the Snake Goddess race, were still humans. Similarly, even though Elvinia had the blood of the Sun Crow race, she didn't have a pair of big golden wings on her back like Elizabeth. About 500 members of the Pear Hill had come, a little more than those of the separate Abyss race. Most of them were half-human and half-snake, dragging a long tail. Nearly a third of them looked the same as humans. Just as they landed, a human girl quickly came out from them. It was Yan who was searching for Zen. Soon after, she finally found him staying with the people of the Oneness Sky Palace. Zen. Yan rushed towards Zen and embraced him tightly. She missed Zen very much. Zen was expected to come when the chaotic source world opened. Now that she finally saw Zen, she was overjoyed. Yan, I'm glad you're all right. Though Zen knew that she was safe under Emily's protection in the Pear Hill, he was still worried that it would be hard for a young girl like her to stay there alone. He was glad that his worry seemed to be unnecessary. Hey, you didn't say anything strange to my brother, did you? Yan suddenly turned to Fuxi and stared at him fiercely. She knew something about Fuxi and became worried that he might do something bad to her brother. Others didn't know if Fuxi owed her or if she had something on him for her to dare to talk to him in a very uninhibited manner. Even Zen was surprised to hear Yan speaking that way. After all, Fuxi was the human sovereign. Elvinia, Dorothy, Athamar, and the others were so shocked that they had a hard time breathing due to apprehension. They couldn't believe the audacity of Zen's sister. On the other hand, the members of the Snake Goddess race looked calm, as if they had already been accustomed to this kind of scene. Furthermore, Fuxi's reaction was beyond everyone's expectation. He was even no longer drunk as he responded submissively, "No, of course not. If you dare talk nonsense to my brother, you're going to get it," Yan said with a stern face as she waved her fist in front of him. Everyone was stunned as they didn't know what was going on. The title of the human sovereign was a symbol of strength and status. As one of the most powerful masters in the source world, Fuxi exuded an aura of unmatched authority. However, none of those seemed to matter as he stood passively in front of Yan. Athamar and the others were extremely shocked. They couldn't stop thinking of what could have possibly happened between them. They observed that Yan enjoyed a high status in the Snake Goddess race. She was surrounded by a crowd of the Pear Hill members as she got off the flying ship. However, that wasn't an enough explanation for what was happening. How could Yan scold the human sovereign in this way, and why didn't he dare to retort? It was a scene that nobody would believe if they didn't see it with their own eyes and hear with their ears. Being threatened by Yan in public, Fuxi felt a bit humiliated. Thus, he tried to make an escape. He said, "Well, I don't need to keep the order here. Members of the Pear Hill, please go to your place." After saying that, he no longer gave Yan any chance to speak. His figure swiftly distorted and flashed away in front of everyone. Dang it, I can't believe he just ran away like that. From Yan's expression, it seemed that she wasn't really finished yet, and had no intention of letting Fuxi go at all. Chapter 2954, The Black Ship Came. Elizabeth and the others returned to their places too. Yan's behavior left them speechless. The pieces of the puzzle finally clicked in her mind. It finally dawned on her why Zen had so many powerful latent theurgies, why he showed incredible ability even when he was at an early stage of the other shore realm, and why he wasn't afraid of the burning of the divine flames of the Sun Crow race. He must have an amazing background. But now, Elizabeth had a new question. With Zen's sister daring to act so rudely in front of Fuxi, she couldn't help but wonder exactly who their parents were. Most of the creatures present were beginning to ask the same question. No one in the source world could make Fuxi react like this. What kind of background did Zen and Yan have? All the disciples of the Flow Sword sect, the unique Erase Sword sect and the Killing Sword sect were shocked by what had happened. Connor, that disciple of your Flow Sword sect seems to have a strong background. A disciple of the Killing Sword sect exclaimed. Isn't he the one who won first place in the Seven Mountains meeting? He doesn't have a powerful background, does he? A disciple of the unique Array's sword sect asked in a hushed tone. Connor and Milo from the Flow sword sect didn't know what to say. In Connor's eyes, Zen was just like Milo, who had worked his way up the Oneness Sky Palace on his own merits. How would he know if there were some hidden truths behind it? Meanwhile, Hyam and Ephraim, the two top talents from the Oneness Sky Palace, shot each other a meaningful look. Zen's talent had made the two of them feel a little discouraged before, but knowing better now, they were at peace with it. There was a reason why Zen was so outstanding. His background was much stronger than theirs. Brother, after the chaotic source world opens, you have to follow my lead, okay? Yan said to Zen with a smile, before walking away and standing in a corner with the other members of the Pear Hill. Zen nodded with a smile on his face. In the Divine Land, there was a time when Yan's strength had also increased greatly, but she was still someone whom Zen needed to protect. But now, she seemed confident that she was strong enough to protect even Zen. It appeared that Yan had made great progress in the Pear Hill. I didn't know that you had a sister, Dorothy said. There was a smile in Elvinia's eyes, like a flame burning in an iceberg. It seems that your sister is more powerful than you, she whispered. Flamen once told Elvinia that Zen was a surviving descendant of the Nine Li race. A super force that had already declined, of course, was incomparable to the Oneness Sky Palace. Naturally, Elvinia had felt her background was more superior to Zen's. Dorothy felt much the same way. But now it seemed they had it all wrong. Zen was more than a surviving descendant of the Nine Li race. From the looks of it, Zen and his sister were likely to be two of the most important ones. Actually, I don't know what happened. Zen scratched his head and smiled sheepishly. In fact, the position of Yan in the Pear Hill was probably much higher than his in the Oneness Sky Palace. After the members of the Pear Hill arrived, the people remained waiting. After a while, some other flying ships came. Some of them belonged to super forces, and some carried other small races. There were more and more people now in all corners of the open space. It was usual practice that the top masters of the superpowers would not lead the teams personally. For example, the leaders of the Seven Mountains of the Oneness Sky Palace had never come, and nor had the Supreme Masters from the Bering race and the Separate Abyss race. After the many large races in the Source World had arrived, a large black ship suddenly appeared in the sky. Seeing it, Athamar, Elizabeth and the team leaders of the super forces were taken aback. The black ship, why are they here? In the past thousands of years, the black ship hasn't trained any new warriors, right? Have they found an extremely powerful warrior? The black ship was a notorious force in the Source World. They didn't ally themselves or compromise with any forces. They robbed all the other forces, including the powerful ones like the Separate Abyss race and the Bering race, so they had countless enemies. But even though all the forces in the Source World hated them, they remained in the Source World. Only once in history had the black ship left. That time, they seized another short token from Stage 30, offending the ear mice in the process. The ear mice had offered a high reward to all the super forces of the Source World to take the black ship down. However, even if the top masters of the Source World did everything they could, they were able to kill only one member of the black ship. The other members escaped and hid in the chaos for hundreds of years. When they came back, they destroyed a very important branch of the ear mice. They also constantly harassed the business teams of the ear mice, killing them whenever they saw them. The ear mice were the businessmen of the Source World, after all, so they wouldn't spend their days fighting. Moreover, the black ship didn't have any fixed stronghold in the Source World. They would flee as soon as they were pressed too hard. The ear mice eventually had no choice but to make peace with the black ship. They even gave the black ship a generous gift in order to settle the matter. It had always been a mystery how many members there actually were in the black ship, but it was widely known that one must be a supreme master in the Source World to become one of them. Occasionally, the black ship would also train new members. But the people it chose tended to be monstrously powerful. The black ship had never come to the chaotic Source World in recent years, which was why their presence now was so unexpected. As the ship flew over everyone's head, a woman in a black dress jumped down and landed firmly on the ground. The woman's skin was as white as paper, her face as adorable as a doll's, and her big eyes alluring. However, if you were sensitive enough, you could sense a deadly aura from her. She was Shira. Fear gripped Elizabeth, Athamar and the leaders of the other large races. The strength of Shira was much stronger than that of Athamar and his peers. She was as strong as the heads of the Seven Mountains and the 5 element emissaries of the Bering race. According to practice, such a strong warrior wasn't allowed to enter the icy snow province. The moment Shira appeared, Fuxi, who had disappeared, came back. I can smell the odor of corpses from you far away. What are you doing here? Get out of here, Fuxi said, glaring at her with contempt. When Shira saw Fuxi, she flashed an innocent smile. She swept back the hem of her dress as she bowed to him, responding sweetly, "You are being too harsh. You know, the most beautiful fragrance in the world is the smell of death." Chapter 2955, The Soul-Devouring Demon. It was understandable for Fuxi to act with hostility towards the black ship. After all, it was against the rules for Shira to enter the icy snow province without consent. This is the final warning. If you don't turn your ship back now, don't blame me for what happens next. Fuxi threatened her with his utmost resolve. The icy snow province was open to the public, but it was still under the direct control of the Pear Hill. As long as the Pear Hill remained fair with the resource distribution in the chaotic source world, the other super forces were content with it. Instead of feeling intimidated by Fuxi's threat, Shira gave him a sweet smile and spoke calmly, "Don't fret yourself, human sovereign. I'm only here to send a young disciple to the chaotic source world. He has a ticket." Then she shifted her gaze upwards to the ship and said, "You can get off now." Those who were cultivated by the black ship were expected to grow more powerful in the future. Shira invited everyone's attention through her mention of the disciple. They all awaited his arrival with impatient eyes as they kept them fixated on the ship. "This woman seems to be really strong. What kind of force is the black ship?" Zen whispered in a low tone as he asked Dorothy. "The people of the black ship are a group of bandits that run amok everywhere in the source world. It is said that there are only about a dozen of them, but each of them is a supreme master. We consider them to be one of the super forces," Dorothy explained to him. "There are only a dozen of them. And yet, they are considered to be a super force. Why is that so?" Zen's pupils dilated in astonishment. According to his understanding, a super force had to have a long history and boast countless talents. For instance, the Oneness Sky Palace housed all human talents in the source world other than the Bering race, the Divine Farmer race, and the Nine Li race. Dorothy's words had shocked Zen as they contradicted his knowledge. "Why not? By now, you should know that strength decides everything. It is said that the leader of the separate Abyss race has to show respect to the head of the black ship. The super forces inferior in power can't touch the black ship," Elvinia further explained to dissolve his confusion. Initially, Dorothy wanted to make it clear to Zen, but Elvinia had beat her to it. A trace of anger flashed on Dorothy's face as she bit her lip. Elvinia noticed Dorothy's expression and gave her a mischievous smirk. Under Shira's command, a young man dressed in black jumped down from the ship. When he landed on the ground, his sheer force had created a ditch on the flat surface and sent ripples far and wide. Slowly, he stood up from his self-made hole and scanned his surroundings. The demeanor he displayed was arrogant and cold. Upon seeing the large number of eyes on him, he laughed and sneered, "Are all these creatures my prey in the chaotic source world? They seem so weak." Everyone present on the scene frowned at his words. The ones who came to the icy snow province today were all from the super forces scattered across the source world. Only the strongest young warriors from these forces were gathered today in one place. They were each qualified in terms of skills. And every talent was proud in their own unique way. However, they had to maintain a low profile as they were faced with many other strong warriors from across the source world. They knew that there would eventually be someone who would be better than them. Although they were powerful, they preferred not to show off. It was better to stay on the safe side than provoke someone who surpassed them in strength. It wasn't wise to make too many enemies, or else they'd be besieged and killed in the chaotic source world. However, the young man who appeared from the ship seemed to not care about that. He looked at them as though they were inferior to him. As soon as he appeared, he uttered harsh words from the start. They had never come across a more arrogant man. Notable warriors like Athamar and Elizabeth didn't take the man seriously. However, they didn't seem to shift their eyes away from him either. But his words had provoked some hot-headed young members and disciples of many super forces. "Who do you think you are? How could you insult us like this by calling us your prey? Your arrogance will be the death of you. You'd better take that back. Otherwise you'll regret it when you enter the chaotic source world." The members of the separate Abyss race, the Divine Farmer race, and some other large races collectively mocked the man. For a moment, the place became noisy with angry disciples ganging up to retaliate against the man. If it were an ordinary person, they would have yielded after hearing those angry words. However, that man stood tall on his feet, refusing to stand down. The corners of his mouth turned into a sinister smile as he returned their glares. A bright light flashed in his eyes as an irrefutable aura of soul gushed out from him. His soul aura was undeniably stronger than those of the indigo souls at the same level. Such an incredible aura. Sensing the overwhelming aura, the young disciples and the leaders such as Elizabeth and Athamar stood stunned. They couldn't believe that the man had cultivated his soul of light to such an extent in the lust world. The members of the black ship were really a force to be reckoned with. The small spectacle of his power tied the tongues of the young disciples. How come the soul of this young man in black is so powerful? A burly young man belonging to the divine farmer race voiced his concern from the crowd. A woman was standing next to him. Her curly hairs hung loosely on her face as though they were an accessory. She spoke in a teasing tone, "Uncle Mount, are you afraid of him because he's much stronger than you? I wouldn't count on a strong soul. When I surpass the lust world and cultivate in the desire world, my soul of light will advance to a higher level. I'll surpass him in no time. He shouldn't act so conceitedly since he's alone. This guy won't stand a chance if the others decide to lay siege against him in the chaotic source world," the burly young man blurted out as he shrugged his shoulders. Ha ha ha, the woman beside him broke out in a fit of weird laughter, but she didn't refute his claims. A white-haired young man from the Bering race nudged at his clansman with a frown on his face. "Khalid, keep a close watch on this guy once we enter the chaotic source world." Khalid, the man he addressed to, nodded and said, "Understood." He must possess a valuable other shore token for him to cultivate his soul of light to such a degree. The true level-headed talents from various races did not shout curses to assert dominance. Instead, they quietly observed their opponents from a distance to concoct strategies against them, such as Zen, Ephraim, and Elvinia from the Oneness Sky Palace and Yan from Pear Hill. Of course, the young man in black, namely the evil god, had easily caught their attention. After the evil god gave them a taste of his intimidating aura, he gave a smug smile and said, "Back on the other shore, all of you were running scared out of fear of being devoured by me. So, you took refuge inside the temples. I'd watch out if I were you since there are no temples for you to hide in the chaotic source world." "What, devoured by you?" Everyone in the crowd shared expressions of puzzlement on their faces before they realized who this man was. Ah, no wonder his soul aura seems familiar. It's him. There's no mistake. He is the soul-devouring demon. It must be him. His voice sounds the same. I remember now. Suddenly, the expressions of all the young men of the large races switched drastically. It was said another man had made trouble in Stage 4 after Zen destroyed the temple of the Bering race. No one could tell what soul theurgy this man used. They only knew he was capable of sucking all the souls of light into his body. It was apparent the cultivation of his soul of light improved significantly due to that. And yet he still retained his control over himself and didn't go mad at all. The three orthodox forces of the human race, as well as several other large races, had suffered irreversible damage by this man. The more souls of light he absorbed, the more his cultivation base improved. He was able to run amok in the entire Stage 4 and walked out unscathed. Since they were unaware of his origins, they had given him the title of the soul-devouring demon. The name of the soul-devouring demon soon caught the attention of many people. Each time they heard of it, the people would tremble in fear. However, never did they expect this man in black was the soul-devouring demon. Chapter 2956, Teach him a lesson. The soul-devouring demon should keep a low profile now, on account of how wild and ruthless he had behaved on the other shore. No one had thought he would ever be so arrogant. He was so fearless, he had offended almost all the super forces and then still had the audacity to admit to his evil deeds. It was no wonder the black ship chose him. On the other hand, Shira seemed to have no intention to restrain the young man in black and showed zero care for his safety. Zen was inquiring of the origin of the black ship when the young man in black appeared suddenly before him. Zen stood up with eyebrows raised and his eyes glazed over in disbelief. "What's wrong?" Elvinia asked in confusion. "Zen, do you know him?" Dorothy was confused as well. Both Dorothy and Elvinia were totally confounded. Not only did Zen have something to do with the Pear Hill, but he also seemed to know this man from the black ship. However, Zen had just asked of the origin of the black ship. It might be possible he knew nothing about it. "Yes, I know him," Zen answered with a bitter smile. "He is a secondary creature from my inner world." "What, a creature in your inner world?" Elvinia and Dorothy were both flabbergasted. Athamar stood at the front and turned his head in shock on hearing Zen's words. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes," Zen replied sourly. "I released him when I entered the source world. I didn't expect him to get so powerful in such a short period of time. When he had released the evil god, He felt he owed him something because of the way's blending energy. Although he was aware the evil god had an incomparable talent, he never thought he would be capable of growing and improving his cultivation base at such speed, and join a force like the Black Ship. Zen had taken precautionary measure though. He had built him a rebirth land. He could sense the evil god's general position if he was near him, but Zen hadn't known until the evil god jumped from the Black Ship. How had he avoided the restraint of the rebirth land? Zen knew the rebirth land was not omnipotent, but he never imagined the evil god would break free so quickly. Zen's revelation left Elvenia, Dorothy and Athamar speechless. What amazed everyone was how powerful both Zen and the creature from his inner world were. They both possessed such formidable strength that it was hard to comprehend. The young man in black looked strong and arrogant. He was definitely not a kind man. Elvenia, Athamar and Dorothy still wondered if perhaps Zen had mistaken this young man for someone else. Many forces were still digesting the words of the young man in black, when he turned his head and looked at the members of the Oneness Sky Palace. When he saw Zen, the wild and evil smile on his face grew and was even more prominent now. What a coincidence! My creator is here too, the evil god bellowed for all to hear. Everyone looked around in confusion. The creator? What do you mean? It sounds like a supreme title. Ha ha, is it referring to the creator of the inner world? Everyone present had created the inner world, which was basically complete. They had at least completely created 100 Sanskrit land. They all had their own titles in their inner worlds, such as the God of Creation, the Paramount Creator, the Lord of Life and so on. All sorts of strange titles existed. They were the absolute masters of their own inner worlds and it was perfectly normal for the secondary creatures within to address them by those titles. However, such titles would confuse everyone in the source world and the chaos. Only the one who created the source world was qualified to be called the Creator. Shira's big eyes blinked and released a ray of spiritual light. The revelation that it was a disciple from the Oneness Sky Palace who had created the evil god irked her. Zen was not the slightest bit unnerved in the face of the evil god. He took a step forward and said, "It is indeed a coincidence. I haven't expected you to have raised your cultivation base so fast." Everyone looked on, trying to understand their relationship. The evil god stared at Zen as if he were his prey. Eventually he spoke, "I must thank you. It's an honor to have been born in your inner world. Even so, I wanted to kill you every second of every hour I lived in your inner world." Wow, this sent everyone present into an uproar. The members of the Bering race and the separate Abyss race, and even Fuxi were shocked. Was he kidding? Was this young man really the secondary creature of Zen's inner world? Yan, who stood on the opposite side, bit her lips and said in a low voice, "Zen." It was true, this powerful young man in black really did come from Zen's inner world. He had been a secondary creature once. From the evil god's point of view, he could not allow anyone to be superior to him. However, as a member of Zen's inner world, no matter how powerful he was, he still could not disobey Zen. All it would take was a gaze or a thought from Zen to kill him 1,000 times over. Before, the evil god had to endure this subjugation and restrain himself to wait for the perfect chance to leave. In the end he had won Zen's trust and finally escaped from that world. "It seems I made a mistake by letting you leave my inner world. Perhaps I should kill you with the rebirth land," Zen said flatly. He knew the evil god had found a way to make the rebirth land ineffective, and he simply uttered the words to see his reaction. "You're welcome to try, ha ha," the evil god chuckled again. As he laughed, a terrifying force began crashing towards him. "Watch out," Shira was shocked at this scene. "Human sovereign, how dare you!" Bang, Fuxi, not far away, stretched out his finger and pressed it downwards slightly and an invisible force shoved the evil god to the ground. Before Shira even realized what had happened, Fuxi stretched his hand out and pulled the evil god over to him, grabbing him by the neck. Such was Fuxi's power that even just one of his fingers was capable of releasing this incredible strength. The evil god had sustained serious injuries. Blood flowed like a river as he was unable to move in Fuxi's grip. Shira's lovely face darkened and morphed strangely. Her dark pupils were completely vacant and the whites in her eyes, terrifyingly, had disappeared. She was now in a fighting state which she would only get into when faced with a powerful opponent such as Fuxi. Fuxi paid no attention to Shira. He gripped the evil god's neck tightly and yelled in his face, "I don't care where you're from. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If anyone dares attack Zen outside the chaotic source world, I'll kill them." Blood trickled down from the evil god's forehead, a violent force flowed through his body and one of his eyes began glowing with hatred. He had never suffered such a loss. But Fuxi was so incredibly powerful. He was a mere ant to Fuxi, a little creature with no strength to fight back, just as he had been with Zen in the past. Chapter 2957, Inner World Generating Avatar. Swish. Fuxi dragged the evil god like a soiled piece of rag that left a bloody trail on the ground. He pointed at Shira with a glare. You and your ship get out of the icy snow province. Now. His harsh, unfriendly tone served as a warning to Shira that if she didn't heed his words, a fierce battle was bound to ensue. Shira willed herself to calm down, her eyes returning to normal as she relaxed. Fuxi, with his formidable strength, could have easily killed the evil god with the tip of his finger but chose to only teach him a lesson instead. Shira knew he was going to be fine despite his dismal state. Well, this isn't so bad, she thought to herself as she looked down at her beaten disciple. She was a soft-hearted woman who accepted the evil god and his arrogant personality. However, his arrogance could get extreme at times and would only grow in the future. Shira hoped that Fuxi's lesson would serve to temper his insolence and strengthen his character. She walked towards the evil god and threw a golden pill towards him. Get up, we'll wait for you outside the icy snow province. Then, she lifted the hem of her black dress and gave Fuxi a respectful bow. It'll be hard for us to explain to our captain if there's anything wrong with him. Please hold yourself back, human sovereign. There was an edge to her tone, an evident warning. If the evil god died in the chaotic source world then he would only have himself to blame. However, dying outside the chaotic source world was another thing entirely. Whoever attacked him would earn the wrath of the black ship. After saying her piece, Shira departed by vanishing on the spot. At the same time, the black ship began to sail away serenely like a graceful specter. Fuxi snorted, watching the black ship's departure with a frown. He lingered for a few moments before he too employed the grand teleportation technique and disappeared. At the next moment, he suddenly appeared on top of a snowy mountain where he could see the entirety of the chaotic source world. He picked up a wine jar from somewhere and took a healthy swig. Fuxi hated trouble. The only reason he stood with Pear Hill and maintained order in the icy snow province was to beg for someone's forgiveness. The evil god remained curled up on where he lay. He looked like a soiled rag wrung together to get rid of excess water. This humbling sight gave everyone a sort of pleasant feeling in their hearts. An arrogant man was never pitied by anyone, especially since that man also turned out to be the notorious soul-devouring demon. Many great races hated him right to the core. Grunting heavily, the evil god forced himself to sit up and threw the golden pill Shira had left into his mouth. He then crossed his legs and closed his eyes as a sinister smile hung on the corner of his mouth. Shira fully believed that Fuxi could teach the evil god a lesson, however, she was wrong. Even Zen, who had been the evil god's creator, did not fully understand how his mind worked, so what more could she? The evil god once dared to rebel against Zen when he was still in his creator's inner world. He perfectly understood Zen's significance to the entire inner world along with the fact that he was an invincible being. Nevertheless, the evil god commenced with the rebellion. To his misfortune, Zen was an omniscient and omnipotent being in his inner world. His avatar was only a minuscule part of his soul, and even if it was killed, that would scarcely even harm him, much less kill him. With this, the evil god was driven to try harder. He was motivated by a primitive evil will that refused to make him compromise to anyone, even his creator. Zen had already noticed the evil god's intents back then and had wanted to kill him. During that time though, Zen had just entered the divine land and had no time to take care of his inner world. He needed a powerful individual to help him manage his inner world and thus spared the evil god's life. Initially, no sort of crisis occurred in his inner world as the evil god chose to behave obediently. Even when living in seclusion, he left behind a system that maintained peace in Zen's inner world. What Zen didn't know was that the evil god was merely restraining his evil will while he absorbed the power of the godly ways. The evil god was extremely talented and grew his strength rapidly. He even managed to blend together a large number of godly ways and gained freedom from Zen's inner world. In short, the evil god was someone who never gave in to anyone. Fuxi's power may have been great but he was not an unbeatable enemy. If the evil god refused to submit to his own creator, what more Fuxi? As he healed himself with the aid of the pill, a weird aura emanated from his body. Those who sensed his aura felt terribly annoyed by it. Even Elizabeth and Athamar, despite being powerful beings, couldn't resist the feeling of aggravation in their guts. It couldn't be explained in terms of physical strength or soul power. The evil god was just born to be evil, as the enemy of the world. Zen, this person from your inner world. He is quite extraordinary, Elvinia remarked with disgust. The pill had done its work, healing most of the wounds on the evil god's body. He was incredibly handsome for someone so evil, charming too if only the vileness he emanated didn't disgust Elvenia that much. Zen couldn't help but regret ever releasing this man from his inner world. He had made a strong enemy for himself that he now had no way of restraining. Zen, have you ever heard of an inner world generating avatar? Dorothy suddenly asked. A what? Inner world generating avatar? He turned to her with a confused look. It's a special cultivation method that was quite popular a long time ago, Athamar said. There were numerous creatures within a warrior's inner world. As always, elites would always sprout amongst these creatures, armed with peerless talents and endless potential. If a warrior trained these elite creatures separately, allowing them to grow and even taking them out of their inner worlds, then they could turn them into their avatars. But these avatars have their own consciousness. They're their own person, right? Zen asked. Athamar nodded. That's true. In fact, the inner world generating avatar is regarded as an evil skill. The rebirth land is used as a method to better cultivate and control an inner world generating avatar. Zen pondered his words for a bit. I don't think many people create their avatars nowadays though. Why is that? Athamar did mention that this skill was popular a long time ago but not anymore. That meant there was something probably wrong with it that rendered it unacceptable. Because it's very difficult to control the avatars through the rebirth lands. Many secondary creatures betrayed their creators after leaving their inner worlds. They never gave their creators a chance to annihilate their consciousness at all, Athamar explained. There were 2 steps in the creation of inner world generating avatars. The first would be to select the target creatures and build rebirth lands for them. The second would be to take them out of the inner world for training. After a certain amount of time, when the creatures were deemed ready, the creators would then erase their consciousness and turn them into avatars. Since they were born in their inner worlds, the creators would find no rejection at all when entering their avatars. They would feel like their own bodies. Avatars created this way were deemed the strongest. Chapter 2958, at a random order. Zen was shocked to hear of such a method for cultivating an avatar. It was not fair to the avatar, who was not really the warrior, just a substitute. The avatar had its own consciousness and its own life. But it seemed that during those days, the powerful masters did not let too many worries or scruples get in the way of their activities. In some of the larger forces, the warriors whose strength ranked 2nd to 5th, were all puppet avatars of their leaders. Nowadays, it was extremely rare to see creatures that cultivated the inner world generating avatar. On one hand, it was easy to get rid of the rebirth land. On the other hand, the level of strength pursued by the living beings in the source world was getting higher and higher. When the other shore had first opened, creatures from the warrior's inner worlds would enter the other shore and fuse with the other shore tokens in stage 3 or stage 4. Then the creators would erase the memories of those creatures and transform them into their avatars. For warriors as strong as Athamar, they needed to let the creatures from their inner worlds enter stage 20, or a higher stage. It took time to train an avatar. The longer the training, the greater the chance that the creatures would discover the truth of the source world, and then they would try to get rid of the control of the rebirth land. No creature wanted to be an avatar. When a creature whose memories had been erased was transformed into an avatar, it lost its soul. It could no longer enter the other shore, and its cultivation base could not increase. Thus, while Athamar was easily able to cultivate a few avatars in the 3rd or 4th stage of the other shore realm, these avatars were too weak and useless for him. Then, Zen said slowly, looking at the evil god standing nearby. He was created by you. If you have the chance, you can turn him into your avatar in the future, Athamar said flatly. Of course, you must ensure you are stronger than him, Dorothy cautioned. Otherwise, he will defeat you sooner or later. He might even be able to transform you into an avatar. It sounds impossible, but it is recorded that such a thing has happened before. Zen nodded, deep in thought. The evil god was too sinister. If there was a chance, Zen must try his best to punish and control him. Inner world generating avatar was indeed a good choice in this case. However, as Dorothy had warned, it was crucial to be at the proper level of strength. If Zen tried to take on the evil god without being strong enough, it was entirely possible that he would be the one to end up getting killed, or getting transformed into an avatar. As Zen, Dorothy, and Athamar spoke, more and more ships flew down from the sky, landing beside the pillars. Many small races were arriving at the icy snow province. Occasionally, 1 or 2 larger ships of the super forces would show up. Everyone present was calm and composed. Some of them sat cross-legged and closed their eyes to cultivate, while some of them entered the other shore to make deals and deal with things there. Each time the chaotic source world opened, a silence would settle over the noisy, busy stage 13. After all, the best souls of light from stage 13 were gathered at the gate of the chaotic source world. A day passed. Zen, standing with Elvinia and the others, felt a faint vibration in the ground. The tremor also caught the attention of his companions. Zen, Elvinia, and the others looked instinctively to their right. The vibration was coming from the chaotic source world. There were tens of thousands of people present, and every single one wore a look of eager anticipation. Everyone was praying that they would win the competition and become chaotic source realm warriors. The members of the large races were expectant and ready to get started, their eyes lit with fighting intent. The process of reaching the chaotic source realm was by no means a simple matter of fusing with the chaotic source spirits. It was a vicious battlefield. Members of various races faced off against each other, all prepared to do whatever took to claim victory. According to the rules set by the Pear Hill and the large races, there must be no retribution. No matter who killed a warrior in the chaotic source world, the warrior's race would not be allowed to punish the killer. As the vibration reverberated across the ground, the giant black egg began spinning slowly. However, upon closer observation, they saw that it was not really the egg itself that was spinning. Rather, it was the thick black smog inside the enchanted barrier that spun slowly. One by one, the runes lined in front of the gate of the chaotic source world began lighting up. The stone door in front of the participants gradually began to open. Two women stood beside the stone door. They were members of the snake goddess race. One of them shouted, "The chaotic source world has opened. The people from the Pear Hill will enter first." Those who entered the chaotic source world first had a great advantage. They could lie in wait as the others arrived, and ambush them. Or they could quickly rush into the depths of the chaotic source world without worrying about encountering other warriors. Since the Pear Hill had contributed the chaotic source world, the members of the Pear Hill naturally had a privilege that no one from other races could obtain. Each time the chaotic source world opened, the members of Pear Hill were always the first to enter. Yan stood up. Her gaze fell on Zen. She gestured towards him and slightly moved her lips, saying through her life vitality, "I'll be waiting for you inside." Zen frowned. He had no desire to be a burden on Yan. If she had a superior ability to protect herself, then he would much prefer that she go as deep into the chaotic source world as she could. "There's no need. You'd better absorb the chaotic source spirit first," Zen responded. Yan looked unhappy. She resolved not to listen to Zen. She would wait for him once she was inside, regardless of what he said now. The members of the Pear Hill lined up and passed through the stone door one after another. As they passed, they pressed their tickets to the chaotic source world against the runes by the side of the stone door. They were allowed to enter only after the tickets were shattered. As soon as all the Pear Hill members had entered, a woman standing by the stone door stepped forward. She lifted a handful of petals to her lips and lightly blew, and the petals scattered outwards in all directions, like a colorful rain. They seemed to multiply as they drifted on the wind, until there were tens of thousands of petals. One of the petals floated directly towards Zen. It came to a stop in front of him and hovered motionless in the air. Zen reached out and grasped the petal gently between two fingers. He looked closely at the petal and saw a number written on the delicate surface. 13,352. Zen muttered. "Mine says 7,000, said Elvinia, showing her petal to Zen. "I have 18,060, said Dorothy. Zen lightly placed the petal on his palm. "So this is the sequence in which we'll enter the chaotic source world. Is it always like this? Warriors enter in an entirely random order." Zen had assumed that the members of the same race could enter the chaotic source world together. As allies, they could watch out for each other and cooperate in order to get further. But this random sequence made that impossible now. In the past, members of the same race were allowed to enter together, but they just ended up fighting in groups almost as soon as they entered the chaotic source world. So the rule was changed, Elvinia explained. Many large races and super forces had long histories with each other, which often involved some degree of enmity and animosity. When groups of warriors entered the chaotic source world and began fighting each other, this caused enormous losses to many races. To minimize the needless deaths, the Pear Hill had decided that participants would enter the chaotic source world individually, and that the order of entrance would be determined randomly. Sally, Hutton, and the others held their own petals in their hands. They also looked surprised at this unexpected twist. This rule had only been in place for a few decades, and they had not yet heard of it. They had all been operating under the assumption that they would enter together, and they were at a loss at this development. "Don't worry, I will wait for you at the entrance," Zen said to Sally with a smile. Unexpectedly, Sally curled her lips at Zen, shaking her head. She morosely showed him her petal. You'll be waiting a long time. Look, I got number 39,000. Chapter 2959, The Wind. Under normal circumstances, those who entered the chaotic source world needed to fend for themselves. But if they banded together, they would have a greater chance of succeeding. Therefore, the 6-9 people were willing to follow Zen. Sally, however, felt a bit disheartened since her number on the petal was so big. Zen glanced at the number and smiled faintly. Don't worry, even if we get separated, we will still be able to locate each other, thanks to the soul marks. When they were still on the flying ship, Zen had marked the bodies of the 9 people, Elvinia and Dorothy. Okay, Sally nodded meekly. Meanwhile, the members of the super forces studied the numbers on their petals. Comparing the numbers between them, some obviously felt a little depressed over the gaps. In low voices, they discussed amongst themselves how they'd meet in the chaotic source world. Others glanced at the petals and then decidedly ignored them. Milo, the burly young man and the curly-haired woman from the divine farmer race were among those who ignored the numbers. These were the sort of people who were fully confident in their strength and talent, so they frowned upon the idea of working with others. Once the woman standing in front of the stone gate had distributed all the petals, she cleared her throat. Everyone, take your tickets and enter the chaotic source world according to your numbers. Now, the first one. As soon as she finished her words, a young man from the bearing race stepped forward. Smiling confidently, he rushed towards the stone gate, waving his ticket in the air. The number on his petal was 1, so he was the first to enter the chaotic source world. He felt extremely lucky. After showing his petal at the stone gate, he then pressed his ticket onto the runes by the side of the gate. Once the runes smashed his ticket, he flew in. Immediately after, a werewolf with silvery hair from the celestial wolf race came forward. The number on its petal was 2. After having its ticket checked, it quickly followed suit. The creatures started surging forward according to the numbers on their petals. Within an hour, more than 6,000 people had entered the chaotic source world. The 7,000th one, the woman at the stone gate called. Elvinia turned to Zen calmly. I'm going in. Then, she floated elegantly to the gate and stepped inside. Later came the 8,000th one. Then, the 9,000th. The 10,000th. The 12,000th. The 13,000th. Even then, many creatures were left at the gate, waiting for their turns. The 13,352nd. The woman finally called Zen's number. Zen smiled at Dorothy and the 6-9 people. I will wait for you inside. Then he turned and leapt to the stone gate. After he gave his petal to the woman, she said softly, Yan didn't go deep into the chaotic source world. After you enter the stone gate, go right and you'll see her waiting for you there. She frowned as she spoke. Zen could tell she was full of reproach. The woman didn't care who Zen was. She only knew that Yan was willing to delay her own cultivation by waiting for this disciple of the Oneness Sky Palace, which made her unhappy. Zen knew what she was thinking. With a smile, he placed the ticket on the runes. Crack. After the ticket was torn apart, Zen stepped into the chaotic source world. After passing through the stone gate, Zen was shrouded in a black smog, and his surroundings became dim. Even so, it was not as dark as the dark region. The dark region was completely shrouded in pitch blackness. Here, in the chaotic source world, it was as though a thick, black smog clouded everything. Meanwhile, Zen also felt a strong resistance in the air. The air was strangely thick. It was as though he had fallen into a quagmire, with a thick, heavy atmosphere enveloping him. Is this resistance coming from the black smog? Zen wondered. The smog was everywhere, so he couldn't get rid of the resistance. He tried to blow the smog away by waving his arms, but it didn't do much. Gathering 30 divine megatons of force, he flapped his arms more furiously, and finally the air caved a bit. Only then was he able to walk properly. This smog is truly powerful. This place is inconceivable. Zen raised his eyebrow in surprise. Those who had just reached the other shore realm wouldn't be able to move in this place. Even if they used all their strength, they wouldn't stand a chance. The true gods would probably be crushed by the smog upon entry to the chaotic source world. Whoosh. After Zen, a member of the separate abyss race had entered. Locking eyes momentarily, Zen could see a hint of fear in his eyes. Although this person didn't know Zen's true power, Zen seemed to have attracted the attention of the human sovereign. Moreover, the young man in black had come from Zen's inner world. He figured it was better not to get on such a person's bad side. While the separate abyss race was known for being arrogant, the man broke eye contact and quickly ducked into the black smog without a word. Zen shrugged. He didn't have the time to ruminate over such trivial things. Yan is waiting for me on the right side. Zen activated the other shore power and flew through the smog. Although 30 divine megatons of force was enough for him to move in the mysterious black smog, it had restricted his freedom to a certain extent. He couldn't speed up, nor could he use his explosive power. Even so, Zen knew it was only fair that the chaotic source world had this restriction aimed at everyone. After flying a bit towards the right, Zen had seen only rusty-looking stones. There was no sign of Yan. Where is she? Zen frowned. Yan was a woman of her word. She had promised she'd meet him there, so where was she? Zen's frown deepened. If she wasn't here, she could be in trouble. He couldn't help but feel a bit worried. Unfortunately, he hadn't left a soul mark on her body, so there was no way of finding her. After wandering around for a while, he tried locating Elvenia. His expression changed abruptly once he found her. Elvenia had entered the chaotic source world only shortly before him, yet she was 40,000 miles away from him. If they were in the outside world, Zen wouldn't have been so shocked. After all, they could use the grand teleportation. However, teleporting was forbidden in the chaotic source world. With this smog-constricting movement, how could she possibly be that far ahead? While Zen was busy pondering over this, he failed to notice a wind was steadily rising in the chaotic source world. Suddenly, he felt something pushing him fiercely. The force of the wind was incredibly powerful. Before Zen had the time to react, he was violently swept up into the air by the wind. Chapter 2960, Sea Dragon Race. Each speck of dust was a small individual that contributed to the black smog area in the chaotic source world. The area had the diameter of millions of miles. The smog was so dense and heavy that it was difficult for all living beings to move, let alone the wind. Naturally, the wind of the chaotic source world required more strength than they could have imagined. As Zen found himself being carried by the wind, he now understood how Elvenia traveled tens of thousands of miles into the chaotic source world in such a short amount of time. Elvenia did not make it on her own. She rode along the strong wind to get there. But if that was the case, then perhaps Yan had also been transported by the wind. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Zen moved in the air at an increasingly high speed. Before I came to the chaotic source world, I had never heard of such a strong wind. Has the chaotic source world changed? He thought. Besides, the woman from the snake goddess race had dropped a hint that Yan was waiting for him there. It seemed the woman was unaware of any change that had occurred. 5 minutes had passed and the strong wind finally began to subside. As the wind calmed down, Zen steadily descended and landed on a firm, brown rock. Using the soul mark, he found that Elvenia was now around 60,000 miles away from him. It was a far distance, and he knew he couldn't get there so quickly. However, Zen was not in a hurry. After all, everyone had just arrived at the chaotic source world. It would take them time to adjust and get used to the place, so there shouldn't be any threats soon. He stood on the tall rock and looked around. The place was lifeless, quiet, and deserted. He didn't even spot greenery from where he was standing. The black smog might have just been too heavy, making the environment too harsh for ordinary beings. Perhaps nothing could thrive here except for the chaotic source spirits. Before we set out, Dorothy mentioned that the chaotic source spirits like hiding underground and in the rocks. Zen thought to himself. Maybe I can search for them in the rocks. He then lifted his foot and stomped down hard against the rock he stood on. Clatter. With a crisp sound, cracks began to appear across the surface. The formation suddenly collapsed and disintegrated into countless, rocky pieces. Dorothy also mentioned that there was no chaotic source spirit in weak rocks. If they were to dwell in one, it would have to be extremely solid. Even so, Zen still continued to search among the rock fragments, having no success in finding a chaotic source spirit. He jumped to another rock and stomped hard on the surface. Clatter. Like the first one, the rock cracked and eventually shattered. This time, Zen didn't rummage through the broken pieces, but he made his way to another rock and jumped. He repeated this on 20 more rocks, jumping and shattering them into little pieces. Of course, he ended up with no finds. This did not discourage him. He was only along the edge of the chaotic source world. Moreover, obtaining the chaotic source spirit was never going to be easy. With all his determination, Zen jumped on rock after rock in the hopes of finding a solid one. After he landed on the 28th rock, to his surprise, it did not break into pieces. It let out an odd, muffled sound. He stomped on it some more, each step having more power than the last. However, the rock wouldn't budge, and it did not crack at all. His eyes lit up and the corners of his lips lifted. He thought, could this rock have the chaotic source spirit? What luck! After fighting Ahmad, Zen learned a lot about the chaotic source realm. He knew that the chaotic source reinforcement didn't make one's physical body stronger. Essentially, the chaotic source reinforcement was to fuse the chaotic source spirit with the body. After this, the attacks received by a warrior would be borne by the chaotic source spirit. However, the chaotic source spirit's ability to bear power had a limit. When the power exceeded the amount that the chaotic source spirit could bear, it would fall into a state of fatigue, unable to bear any more. When this happened, the body that had undergone the chaotic source reinforcement would collapse and weaken. If a chaotic source spirit was in the rock, it could help the rock bear outside forces and attacks. That was why the rock seemed indestructible. It was the chaotic source spirit that was strong, not the rock itself. Let's see just how much power you can bear. Zen smirked and jumped up abruptly, circling up in the air before pounding his fists downwards. Bang! He exerted the power in his arms, which was around 500 divine megatons. The huge rock trembled, but didn't budge. It withstood Zen's punches. Interesting. Bang, bang, bang. Undisturbed by the rock's resilience, he continued to punch down as hard as he could. And after 8 solid punches, a minuscule crack appeared right down the middle of the rock. Arg! A grayish-brown ball-like thing squeezed out from the small crack, and bounced away to the side. Even though it was Zen's first encounter with the thing, he was quite certain that this was the chaotic source spirit. It seemed that Zen's strong blows made the chaotic source spirit jump out of the rock and escape. You want to escape? I don't think so. Zen leapt into the sky and chased after the chaotic source spirit, like a vicious hawk on the hunt for its prey. However, the black smog slowed Zen down. It was a good thing that the chaotic source spirit didn't move quickly. Otherwise, Zen would have lost it by now. The chaotic source spirit grew exhausted after bearing Zen's attacks. As it ran away, it became slower and slower. This worked to Zen's advantage. But as he got closer to the little thing, 3 figures suddenly appeared in front of him. One of them leaned in and grabbed the chaotic source spirit. These 3 figures had red skin, and their bodies were covered with a thick layer of scales. They had long, thick tails behind them, which only meant one thing: they were from the sea dragon race. Wow, I didn't expect to find a chaotic source spirit minutes after entering the chaotic source world. One of them was overjoyed to find the chaotic source spirit, holding it firmly in his hand as it struggled to get out. He couldn't let it out of his sight. After all, there were only 200,000 chaotic source spirits. So many people fought over them because they were so rare. Thanks to Zen, this particular man was happy to have found one so easily. However, Zen was not too happy about this. His face darkened slightly. I found this chaotic source spirit from the rock and dug it out myself. He looked at them fiercely and added, could you please return it to me? The 3 had no clue that Zen was there in the first place, so they were shocked to see him. They knew that Zen's identity was unusual, but the chaotic source world was different from the outside world. This was a rule set by the snake goddess, who they feared and respected very much. If they really killed Zen, no one would punish them, so perhaps now was a good moment to kill Zen. Hey, are you out of your mind? One of the sea dragon members uttered. No one owns a chaotic source spirit until they get a hold of it. The man smiled, taunting Zen. The group of 3 were not afraid of Zen, because no matter how powerful he was, Zen stood alone against 3. To them, Zen was on a losing end.